If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 116, Family Conflict. Meanwhile, inside the meeting room of the Frenzel main residence. This was a huge room located on the top floor of the central building in the Frenzel main residence. The layout of the room was simple, but the decor was quite luxurious. The furniture and carpets placed within were all high-end items of considerable value. Especially notable was a round table situated in the middle. Its craftsmanship was exquisite, and the quality was superb. The wooden tabletop was so polished that it was almost shining, capable of reflecting clear images like a mirror, making it highly ornamental. "Excuse me. Excuse me." Medist's polite voice and Isaac's timid voice resounded at the same time from outside the meeting room's door. Creak. The door was pushed open by two knights standing outside, allowing the two to enter. Upon entering, ignoring Isaac who kept his head low, Medist was the first to notice the people right next to the round table. There were 3 men of different ages. Among them, 2 were seated, and 1 was standing, clearly indicating their status. Medist's gaze primarily fell on the 2 seated men. Seated on the left was a young man around 20 years old, with dazzling golden hair tied into a small ponytail. Despite his handsome appearance, he had a careless demeanor, constantly glancing around, giving off an air of frivolity. He was Medist's elder brother, the eldest son of the Frenzel family, Cephas Frenzel. Seated beside Cephas, occupying the main position at the round table, was a man with hair as golden as Cephas's, aged over 40 and in his middle years. Yet, traces of his youthful charm remained evident, as there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face, and his noble attire lacked any creases. He was Medist's father, the oldest of the Frenzel family in this generation, and the former family head Alderman Frenzel. "Greetings, father." "Greetings, elder brother." Medist greeted, solemnly bowing her head, seemingly trying to conceal her emotions. "Greetings, father." "Greetings, elder brother." Isaac also followed suit, finally coming to his senses and hastily joining his elder sister in the courtesy. Medist and Isaac, "Hey." Alderman lightly uttered. Well, little brother, little sister, how have you been?" Cephas exclaimed warmly as if it had been ages since he last saw his younger siblings, enthusiastically greeting them. In truth, he had indeed been away for a long time. He often stayed out all night, disliking staying at home and preferring to stay at his so-called friends' houses, his whereabouts highly suspicious. He once claimed he was out doing business and couldn't return home due to inconvenience, but Medist knew he was lying, otherwise, their paths wouldn't have crossed on the street the last time she went out. At that time, his carriage seemed to be heading toward the city gate, and later on, she learned that he would often leave Undine without knowing where he was going. Of course, she had no intention of revealing these things. "We've been doing well," Medist replied politely. "Isaac has been obedient, and everything at home has been peaceful. Thank you for your concern, elder brother." That's good, that's good." Cephas smiled, seeming quite content, and repeatedly nodded. However, Medist, who was adept at reading people, could sense the insincerity and perfunctory nature of his words. Needless to say, his warmth was faked and his concern non-existent. His face was like a mask, making her hesitant to trust his every word and action. Compared to her elder brother, her father, Alderman, always maintained a stern demeanor, appearing awe-inspiring. "What about Yuri?" Alderman coldly asked. "Calling us back in such a manner, only to be absent herself. It seems like becoming the family head has really boosted her confidence, completely disregarding my exist." Before his words could finish, however, a voice interrupted from outside the door. "I'm here." With the arrival of the voice, the doors of the meeting room were once again opened. Yuri arrived, accompanied by Marilyn, entering the meeting room together. "Elder sister! Elder sister!" Medist felt a sense of relief and quickly bowed her head to Yuri, while Isaac seemed to find his backbone and let out a joyful shout. "Medist, Isaac, you're already here." Yuri didn't even glance at Alderman or Cephas, only focusing on Medist and Isaac. As she glanced at her 2 younger siblings, a faint smile finally appeared on her cold face. At this moment, Yuri seemed to have returned home, seeing her own family. Medist and Isaac were equally delighted to see their admired elder sister. In contrast, Alderman and Cephas seemed like outsiders. The relationships among the Frenzel family members, who got along well and who didn't, were evident from this scene. Alderman simply looked on with indifference and spoke up. Since everyone is here, let's all take a seat. Upon hearing her father's words, Medist wanted to remind him that the seat her elder sister should be in right now was the one he was currently occupying. As the family head, her elder sister should be the one sitting in the main seat, not her father. Unfortunately, Medist knew that even if she said so, it would be useless. Many who knew the inside story of the Frenzel family understood that, in fact, although Alderman passed the position of family head to Yuri, he himself never completely relinquished the authority that came with it. Regardless of the situation in the royal capital, here in the Frenzel territory, Alderman was the one who held control, wielding the authority of the territory's lord. No one in the meeting room found this abnormal. The reason was simple. When Yuri became the head of the Frenzel family, she was only 12 years old, not even an adult. At that age, she became a tactical class magician and was thus summoned by the king. However, instead of being granted a noble title and forming her own noble family, since she had already assumed the position of the Frenzel family's head passed down by Alderman, she was unable to establish her independence. During that period, as a declining noble family, the Frenzel family was merely a barren family, and their territory was gradually being reclaimed by the kingdom. Only Undine remained under them, deemed the primary territory of their family. In the end, after Yuri assumed the position of the Frenzel family's head and became the new Baron Frenzel, she went to the royal capital to receive her award as a tactical class magician. Considering she was technically already a noble with Baron status, the king promoted her from Baron to Viscount, thus elevating the Frenzel family's status to that of a Viscount family. It wasn't until 3 years later when she was 15 years old and became a strategic class magician that she suddenly gained overnight fame, causing a commotion throughout the kingdom and even across the entire Akasha continent. As a result, she was summoned by the king again and skipped the title of Count, being directly promoted to Marquis. Despite being regarded as the foremost talent in Genas, Yuri was, after all, still young. Moreover, after being appointed as a chief court magician, she often had to stay in the royal capital to handle kingdom affairs, leaving all matters within her territory to others. With such understanding, people believed that Alderman took on the role of Frenzel territory's acting lord for the sake of his still young daughter. Only those like Medist, who knew the inside story, knew that Alderman was never entrusted with the role of acting lord at all, as he never relinquished the authority of the territory's lord in the first place and always maintained a firm grip over the territory from beginning to end. People believed Yuri Frenzel was the head of the Frenzel family, but they didn't know that the territory of the family had always been under her father's control behind the scenes, never actually passing into her hands as the current family head. In other words, within the Frenzel territory, the one making decisions was Alderman, not Yuri. Even Riesel was unaware of this hidden truth since Yuri had never mentioned it. Yuri herself didn't even care about it in general, paying no attention to her father occupying the main seat, nor did she follow his order to sit down. I need an explanation. As Yuri faced Alderman and spoke those words, the faint smile on her face when facing Medist and Isaac vanished completely, leaving her with an expressionless face. The atmosphere in the meeting room plummeted instantly because of her words. Medist remained silent. Isaac didn't dare to even breathe heavily. Marilyn, like the man standing behind Alderman, watched silently. Cephas wore a nonchalant expression, almost ready to put his legs up on the table if it weren't for the tense atmosphere. Only Alderman and Yuri remained, one with a stern face, the other expressionless, confronting each other. I haven't even asked you for an explanation yet, and you dare to demand one from me. Alderman said coldly. Look at what you've done in the royal capital. Now the relationship between our family and the Baisalo family is completely ruined. Do you realize that? I need an explanation. Yuri ignored his words and just stared at him, repeating her words, seemingly calmer than before. But behind this calmness lay a terrifying sense of oppression. Is this how you talk to your own father? Alderman's composed face was starting to look unpleasant. Yet, she repeated the same words. I need an explanation. Her cold words sent chills down the spines of everyone present. Mind your manners, Yuri Frenzel. Alderman yelled with veins bulging on his forehead, clearly enraged. To his yell, Yuri didn't say another word, simply turning and walking away, heading toward the exit. Upon seeing this, everyone in the meeting room had an instant realization. Once she walked out of that door, things would be irreparable. Yuri was definitely capable of causing a major incident without blinking, since her status as a strategic class magician granted her that privilege. Return at once, Yuri Frenzel. Alderman couldn't contain himself, abruptly standing up, emanating tremendous magical energy from his body. At this moment, the entire meeting room shook. Chapter 117, Past Glory. Alderman Frenzel was a magician. Within the entire Frenzel family, only Alderman and Yuri possessed the talent to become magicians. His magical energy was immense, so much so that becoming a tactical class magician posed no problem. It was only because none of his magic compatibilities reached 5th grade that he couldn't become a tactical class magician. Even so, Alderman undeniably possessed magical energy comparable to that of a tactical class magician. Therefore, when he got angry and his magical energy was unleashed along with his angry emotions, the entire meeting room shook, even startling the knights outside the room. Unfortunately, he chose the wrong person to confront. Magical energy comparable to a tactical class magician? So what? Such a level of power was incredibly fragile in the presence of a strategic class magician. Buzz. As the atmosphere began to tremble, a far more massive and overwhelming surge of magical energy burst forth, instantly overpowering Alderman's magical energy. His magical energy was instantly suppressed, retracting around his body, unable to vent any further. Yuri, on the other hand, was different. The magical energy within her body was like the pressure in the depths of the sea, filling the entire meeting room like an avalanche. It prevented further shaking but distorted the air in the room. In the face of this distortion, Medist was already struggling to breathe, Isaac's eyes were rolling back, and even Cephas no longer had his usual carefree demeanor as his gaze toward his younger sister was now filled with seriousness. Fortunately, this pressure came and went quickly. Perhaps considering Medist and Isaac's presence, Yuri quickly reined in her terrifying magical energy, restoring calmness. Silence spread through the meeting room. After a while, Yuri turned back, looking at her father's unpleasant expression. Explain. Her voice was as cold as snow. This was undoubtedly her final ultimatum, the last chance she gave her father. Realizing this, Alderman, though his face was extremely unpleasant, dared not to act high and mighty anymore. What exactly are you dissatisfied with? Alderman asked while gritting his teeth. The Baisalo territory borders ours, and both they and us are marquee. If we negotiate this well-matched marriage agreement, the two territories can share resources and cooperate. Our family will then become more prosperous and powerful. Isn't that a good thing? At his words, Yuri only laughed out of frustration. You're right, that's indeed a good thing. Yuri squeezed the words out as if they were coming from her throat. But you didn't have my consent. I am your father. Alderman slammed the table and declared loudly. If not me, who else has the authority to decide your marriage? That was what he believed. It was not strange. In this world resembling medieval Europe in Riesel's previous life, especially in the noble society, it was quite normal for parents to arrange marriages for their children. Alderman clearly didn't see anything wrong with his actions. However, it's because of old-fashioned and stubborn thinking like yours that mother got disappointed to the point where she didn't even want to look at your face anymore. Yuri's cold words froze Alderman's expression. 2 years ago, his wife left officially him and went back to her parents' home, all because she couldn't stand his attitude anymore. At that time, he was planning to marry off his eldest daughter, Yuri's elder sister, to someone from a duke family as a concubine. Originally, it wasn't a big deal. Being a concubine to someone from a duke family was akin to entering the royal family directly. It was considered an honor, even if she was only a concubine. However, the problem was that Alderman intended to marry off his eldest daughter not to any duke's son but to the then retired and former duke, a nearly 70-year-old man. Plus, the reason he gave at that time was to make the Frenzel family great again. As a result, his wife took their then 17-year-old eldest daughter and left, never to return, causing Alderman's dream of climbing up to a duke family to go down the drain. Nevertheless, being reminded of this incident by his daughter, Alderman took a deep breath and instead calmed down. Did you forget? Alderman gazed deeply at his daughter, emphasizing each word. Restoring the past glory of the Frenzel family is our family belief, a belief passed down by generations from our ancestors. His words plunged everyone present into silence. Restore the Frenzel family to its former glory was the first line stipulated in the Frenzel family's ancestral belief, the most important one. Once upon a time, the Frenzel family was a highly prosperous family, with a legacy spanning nearly 200 years. The first head of the Frenzel family, the very first ancestor, just like Yuri, was a strategic class magician. As a national treasure and a strategic class military asset of Gina's, he achieved many feats for the kingdom and became a renowned hero of the time, leading the Frenzel family to its peak prosperity. Back then, he had 4 children and took in 7 disciples. Surprisingly, out of these 11, 2 became strategic class magicians and 8 became tactical class magicians, with the remaining one, after realizing he couldn't advance further in the path of magic, resolutely turned to swordsmanship and eventually became a sword saint. 4 children, 7 disciples, a total of 11 people, among whom there was 1 sword saint, 2 strategic class magicians, and 8 tactical class magicians. None of them was mediocre. Without surprise, this undoubtedly shocked countless people at the time and left many countries in awe. Thanks to this, at that time, the Frenzel family quickly reached the pinnacle in both reputation and strength. Not to mention duke families, even the royal family in all the countries on the continent dared not underestimate this family. People even referred to the Frenzel family of that time as the most prestigious family on the continent and believed that this family was the strongest noble family in Genus. Unfortunately, all of this was ultimately just fleeting glory, a momentary splendor. When the first-generation family head passed away and those 11 people also gradually departed from this world, the Frenzel family never again produced another strategic class magician, not even a tactical class magician. After all, becoming a tactical class magician or a strategic class magician depended on personal talent and ability, not on bloodline or legacy. It was not uncommon for the descendants of powerful magicians to lack the talent to become magicians themselves. The fact that the 4 children born to the first-generation family head and the 7 disciples he took in achieved such heights could only be attributed to sheer luck, as they all happened to possess remarkable talent and ability. In the end, after these 11 people passed away, there was no such luck again for the new generation, as each one of them was just ordinary. As a result, the Frenzel family began to decline. However, for the descendants who had personally witnessed the glory, prosperity, and prestige of the Frenzel family, how could they resign themselves to their family's decline? Therefore, they regarded that past glory as something the Frenzel family must reclaim, inscribing it into their family teachings, passing it down from generation to generation, telling later generations that they must prioritize the prosperity and glory of the family and reclaim the former glory before anything else. This obsession, this stubborn belief, had persisted to this day. Alderman Frenzel was precisely the faithful executor of this obsession and belief. He didn't view his own children as insignificant or tools, even if possible, he also hoped they could find happiness. However, these matters were insignificant in the face of the family's beliefs and grand cause. Otherwise, he wouldn't have handed over the position of family head to her still 12-year-old daughter, Yuri. Within the family, Yuri wasn't the eldest child nor a son, but rather the 3rd child and 2nd daughter. According to standard noble tradition, the position of the family head would never be passed to her but to her elder brother, Faz. However, because she had the talent to become a tactical class magician, and even the talent to become a strategic class magician, Alderman didn't hesitate and directly passed the position of family head to Yuri. He knew that as soon as she took the position of family head, the Frenzel family would become a major noble family. In the end, he was right. As for the reason why Alderman still held control of the Frenzel territory, it was not because he coveted power. It was simply because he believed Yuri couldn't manage the affairs in the royal capital while handling the territory simultaneously, as she was too impulsive and fundamentally not ready for such heavy responsibility. Consequently, in order to prevent the Frenzel territory from declining under her leadership, he didn't dare to relinquish the territory's authority. In truth, if Yuri could do everything perfectly, allowing the family to rise steadily and restore its former glory, Alderman wouldn't mind giving up his authority entirely. In Alderman's eyes, the grand cause of the family was everything, and all else could be completely ignored and sacrificed for this grand cause. Yet, it was precisely because of this way of thinking that nobody in the family liked him. Our family is already a major noble, so there's no need to climb any further in wealth or connections. Yuri protested. No, it's not enough. Alderman said without hesitation. When our family was at its peak, our territory directly occupied 1/10 of the entire kingdom. Now we have less than 1/50 of that, far from what it used to be. Humph, why don't you just usurp the throne directly then? Yuri mocked. Seize the king's position and the entire kingdom will be yours. Insolent. Alderman snapped. Do you think you've earned the right to say anything you want now? It's still better than just talking and dreaming like you do, dreaming of the impossible. Yuri retorted coldly. I don't care what you want to do, whether it's to expand the territory, make the family prosper, or even reclaim your position as the head of the family. I can give it all back to you anytime. But if next time I find out you've made such a marriage arrangement without my consent again, I'll go to mother and break ties with this stupid family. You dare? You bet I am. Soon, the father and daughter faced off in the meeting room, throwing insults and curses at each other relentlessly, showing no mercy whatsoever. By the end of their argument, Alderman was visibly very enraged, his palms clenched and veins bulging on his forehead. In the next moment, however, he suddenly declared something shocking. If that's what you want, let's settle who submits to whom according to our family tradition, with the war festival. With his declaration, the faces of everyone present changed drastically. Chapter 118, Fighting Competition? The argument that took place in the meeting room, Riesel naturally knew nothing about. He could guess that Yuri would have some kind of argument with her father, probably not a small one, but he had no idea about the outcome of this argument. He was busy practicing decomposition magic and swordsmanship in the courtyard, and by the time he snapped out of it, it was almost dark. Well, let's go back. Glancing at the darkening sky, Riesel, who was sweating despite not having breathed heavily, returned to the manor, ready to wash himself. At this moment, Riesel finally encountered almost all the members of the Frenzel family. They just came downstairs and happened to meet him. Mr. Riesel. Medist was the first to greet him with a bow, the courtesy still so polite and graceful. Isaac completely ignored him but also didn't confront him again, seemingly mindful of his family members around. Yuri and Marilyn walked somewhat behind, and upon seeing him, their previously expressionless and cold faces relaxed slightly. As for Alderman and Cephas, both almost immediately directed their gaze toward his body. You're Riesel Brynhart. Alderman looked at the young man who appeared to be of Yuri's age before him, sweating all over and holding a wooden sword for some reason. There was a slight ripple in Alderman's stern gaze as he gazed at Riesel. Yes, I am. Riesel nodded, his expression unchanged. He could guess Alderman's identity, probably Yuri's father. Among the people present, only he seemed old enough to be the father figure, while the others were mostly younger than him. However, compared to Alderman, Riesel's attention was somewhat drawn to the man behind him. He was a man with his eyes closed all the time, never opening them, with a sword at his waist, and appeared to be over 30 years old. Among the people present, except for Marilyn, all the others had either golden or silver hair. Yet, this closed-eyed swordsman had brown hair, and his appearance and aura were quite different from those of the Frenzel family, which made Riesel realize that this swordsman probably wasn't related to the Frenzel family. According to Yuri, among her family members, males inherited their father's golden hair, while females inherited their mother's silver hair. Cephas and Isaac had golden hair, while Yuri and Medist had silver hair. It was truly remarkable how strong the genetics of this family were. This also proves that the closed-eyed swordsman emitting a mysterious aura was not a direct relative of the Frenzel family, probably just like Marilyn a subordinate or an attendant. As it turned out, that was the case. Seeing the closed-eyed swordsman constantly following behind Alderman, his entire aura seemed to be locked onto Alderman. If there was even a slight movement around Alderman, this swordsman would immediately react. The others either consciously or unconsciously ignored him. Even in the meeting room just now, the swordsman's presence was pitifully low, not saying a word or making any action from start to finish. Surprisingly, Riesel was the first to notice his presence. There was no other reason. Riesel could feel it, this closed-eyed swordsman was powerful. Though not enough to make him feel endangered, he still sensed a threat from this swordsman. This swordsman, at the very least, was stronger than Anne and Ian, by quite a margin. This sensation was familiar to him since he had felt it before from the three top executives of Loki Familia Finn, Riveria, and Gareth. This is getting interesting. Riesel felt a long-lost sense of excitement. Meanwhile, Alderman, who didn't realize that Riesel was now paying more attention to his attendant than to himself, actually broke into a rare smile after sizing up Riesel. I heard about you, young man. You're pretty good. Alderman praised for no reason. At his praise, Riesel was stunned for a moment. What does he mean by that? Unbeknownst to Riesel, he had actually become quite famous in the royal capital, Yelovaya. While the common people might still be unaware, the well-informed nobles had received news of a tactical class magician on Yuri's side. Alderman was aware of the significant events that happened in the royal capital and naturally knew about Riesel. Although he was very displeased with what his daughter had done, he was rather pleased with Riesel. After all, Riesel was a tactical class magician who belonged to Yuri, which was tantamount to being a part of the Frenzel family. After so many years, the Frenzel family welcomed another tactical class magician aboard, which was a good thing. In its heyday, the Frenzel family had 2 strategic class magicians and 8 tactical class magicians. Alderman, who was well aware of this history, was eager to restore the family's former glory. Therefore, he warmly welcomed and rejoiced in Riesel's addition as their family tactical class magician. With this in mind, Alderman glanced at his daughter beside him before patting Riesel's shoulder. "Keep up the good work." Alderman tried to relax his demeanor, showing his goodwill toward Riesel. "Although the Frenzel family may not offer you much at the moment, as long as you remain loyal to this family, rewards will naturally come your way." Alderman was currently contemplating how to solidify Riesel's relationship with the Frenzel family. The bond between this young man and the family was not very strong after all. During the Frenzel family's heyday, those 11 figures who made the entire continent tremble were either the children or the disciples of the first-generation family head, which clearly established an incredibly strong bond with the family. But Riesel? He had almost no direct relationship with the family. While Riesel was considered to be Yuri's person, given her cold and aloof personality, Alderman doubted she could capture this young man's heart. So, to prevent this rare tactical class magician from slipping away, he was considering whether to marry Metis to Riesel. Marriage was the most convenient and powerful proof of a relationship, after all. Any noble would consider marriage alliances to expand their family connections, strengthen their network, and facilitate alliances and cooperation. For this relationship to truly be secured, Riesel needed to become part of their family as a son-in-law. Alderman didn't express his idea outright. He simply spoke earnestly with Riesel for a few moments, then intentionally or unintentionally shifted the conversation toward Metis, causing Yuri and the others, who somehow realized something was off, to furrow their brows. As for Riesel, unfortunately, his attention wasn't on the youthful and beautiful Metis but on the close-eyed swordsman behind Alderman. Unaware of this, Alderman, seeing Riesel's continued gaze at his back, thought Riesel was gazing at Metis and had taken his words to heart. Feeling quite satisfied, he added a few more remarks, and only later did he leave contentedly. The closed-eyed swordsman immediately followed behind, eyes closed but steps steady, firmly trailing behind Alderman. "Good luck, young man." Cephas finally spoke at this moment, smiling meaningfully at Riesel. "I look forward to your future performance." After saying that, Cephas also left. Metis and Isaac exchanged a few words with Yuri before walking away together, or rather, Isaac attempted to escape, only to be caught by the ear by Metis, who dragged him away despite his protests. Soon, only Riesel, Yuri, and Marilyn remained. Riesel didn't turn around to look at Yuri until the closed-eyed swordsman's figure had vanished from his sight. When he finally did, he noticed something off in her expression. "What's wrong?" Riesel asked in confusion. "Did the conversation not go smoothly?" "No, it's mostly settled." Yuri shook her head. "It's just that man's stubbornness, thinking I can't see through his scheme." He didn't quite understand the meaning behind her words, but he grasped the general idea. "Since it's mostly settled, you shouldn't be randomly arranged for marriage again in the future, right?" "That's good then." Riesel nodded with a faint smile. Even if Yuri's father were to arrange another marriage, Riesel didn't think he would succeed. With her influence, denying any marriage arranged by her father wasn't easy, but it wasn't particularly difficult either. If her father were sensible enough to learn from the incident that just happened and refrain from such actions in the future, they could all coexist peacefully. But if not, given Yuri's somewhat unpredictable personality, she might as well not acknowledge him as her father. As Riesel was still in the middle of his musing, Yuri thought for a moment before shifting her gaze to his face and speaking up. "I have something I want to ask for your help with." Yuri looked straight at his eyes, with a hint of anticipation in her eyes. Go ahead." Riesel replied casually, feeling somewhat surprised but not hesitating. Whether it was out of gratitude for saving his life or for taking him in, he had every reason to help her unconditionally. Not to mention, she had tirelessly helped him, ensuring his safety, granting him access to her important library, and even teaching him her magic unconditionally, which led to his significant growth and accomplishments. With their relationship, if Yuri needed his help, Riesel wouldn't hesitate to help. Even if it involved some danger, he didn't mind taking the risk. Perhaps sensing his inner thoughts, Yuri's anticipatory eyes quickly filled with warmth. "I want to invite you to participate in the upcoming family fighting competition hosted by my family, known as the War Festival." Yuri explained. "War Festival?" Riesel raised his brows. A family fighting competition. Yes. Yuri nodded, then grabbed his hand. Come in, let's talk about it back in the more private room. With that, Yuri led Riesel, accompanied by Marilyn, in the direction of her room. Chapter 119, War Festival. As the name suggests, the so-called War Festival referred to a festival that centered on battle. This was a tradition that had been passed down by the Frenzel family for nearly 200 years. Originally, it had been an annual event used to validate the growth of the family's descendants and to urge later generations to continuously improve themselves. However, over time, this festival gradually evolved into a tradition used by the Frenzel family to resolve internal conflicts. Whenever significant disagreements arose within the family or irreconcilable conflicts emerged among family members, the Frenzel family would hold this festival, and the victor would be able to make any demands they wished of the loser. I see. Inside Yuri's room, after listening to the whole story and the general situation, Riesel nodded. So, in other words, you and your father ultimately decided to use this festival to resolve your conflict. He understood Yuri's intention. Well, I guess so. Yuri said calmly, showing neither approval nor disapproval. Although the tradition of War Festival has disappeared for decades, and we haven't held such a festival in all those years, my father is someone who regards everything the family once had as the highest ideal to pursue. It's not surprising that he would restore this family's traditions. During the meeting earlier, when Alderman mentioned the War Festival, everyone's expressions changed, not because they were surprised, but because they hadn't expected this man to suddenly bring up their family tradition that hadn't been seen for decades at such a time. In a way, Alderman was indeed a bit reckless. Not only did he cause discord within the family for the sake of its prosperity, but he also had a single-minded desire to revive various deeds of the family's past, which felt somewhat crazy. Nevertheless, Yuri herself was disdainful of this so-called family tradition. Alderman thought he could make her compromise by the outcome of the War Festival, but little did he know that she had never considered such a thing since she also had some other ideas for this festival. Leaving that aside, my father values family glory and prosperity more than anything else. If he were to be defeated in the War Festival, he absolutely would adhere to the family tradition and, as the loser, accept whatever demands I make. With this in mind, Yuri decided to participate in the War Festival. What do you plan to demand from your father? Riesel was somewhat curious. I want him to bring back my mother and my elder sister. Yuri answered coldly. Whether he kneels down and apologizes or seeks sympathy through self-sacrifice, he must make my mother and elder sister want to return. Upon hearing that, Riesel could fully imagine how miserable Alderman would be then. That man clearly had a strong sense of pride and placed great emphasis on family honor and glory. If he were to go and apologize to his wife and daughter, whom he had driven away because of his past decisions, it would be an even more unbearable ordeal for him than death. Yuri Frenzel, this woman was truly someone who held grudges. After retaliating against the Baisalo family and various forces in the royal capital, she was now beginning to retaliate against her own father. Truly a terrifying woman. Of course, Riesel himself didn't care. Since Yuri had needed his help, he would naturally help as much as he could. What kind of festival is this going to be? Riesel ventured to ask. Since it's called a war festival, the content should involve fighting, right? Yes, it's like a fighting competition. Yuri affirmed his words and began to explain. The outcome of the festival was decided by 3 rounds of 1 versus 1 fights. In this war festival, both sides sent 3 people into the arena, where one of the 3 participants must be the one who proposed the war festival, while the other 2 could be chosen from outside, whether they were one's own attendants or other external supporters. However, in those 3 rounds, there were corresponding restrictions. In the first round, both sides could only send swordsmen into the arena. In the second round, both sides could only send magicians into the arena. In the third round, there were no restrictions, either swordsman or magician could enter directly. The final result was determined by 2 wins out of 3 rounds, with the one who won 2 rounds first being declared the victor. Having understood the rules, Riesel finally grasped why Yuri had sought his help. Because I'm both a swordsman and a magician, I can participate in any round, hey? Is this why you need me? Riesel murmured. More precisely, it's because you are not only a powerful swordsman but also an outstanding magician that I need you. Yuri clarified with a chuckle. In order to maximize the chances of winning the war festival, she needed him to be the trump card on her side. Judging by the power he has shown so far, his winning odds were extremely high no matter which round he participated in, especially in the third round, where his advantage as a master of both swordsmanship and magic was unparalleled. At that time, whether Alderman sent a swordsman or a magician, Riesel would had a chance to win, and a significant one at that. At least, in Yuri's view, as long as her father didn't send a sword saint, Riesel had a good chance of winning. However, did Alderman even have the capability to bring in a sword saint to assist him? The answer was naturally no. Although the Frenzel family held the title of Marquis, they had only recently risen in the past few years, no different from newly established nobles. Compared to other Marquis families that had existed for decades or even centuries, their foundation was still relatively shallow. Within the Frenzel family, they had managed to recruit several sword masters, but the idea of obtaining a sword saint was simply out of the question. Such figures typically only served royal families, duke families, or were major nobles themselves, so it was unthinkable for the family to be able to invite them. If it was just a matter of inviting them to attend the festival and show face, then Yuri could still handle it, but expecting them to participate in the fight was highly unlikely. If even she, who was in her current status, found it challenging, then let alone Alderman. From Yuri's perspective, if there were no sword saints, Riesel's chances of winning would be quite high. In such a scenario, she wanted him to step in, represent her side, and be prepared to enter the arena in the third round of the competition, securing the final victory. I will participate in the second round, and I believe my father will do the same. Yuri continued. She and her father were both magicians. Either they will make their move in the second round or in the third round. To avoid losing 2 consecutive rounds right away and directly letting her father win, she had to make her move in the second round. This way, even if her side lost the first round, it wouldn't directly result in defeat. She was certain that her father, like herself, had the same concerns and ideas. Therefore, it was almost certain that they would encounter each other in the second round. Could you defeat your father? Riesel furrowed his brows. Unfortunately, in this kind of direct one-on-one confrontation, neither tactical class magic nor strategic class magic could be used. Their preparation time was too long to be effective in the fast-paced battle. However, if it were Riesel, then it didn't matter. After all, he could use concurrent chanting, allowing him to chant magic even during combat without worrying too much about his magic not being released due to lengthy chanting and enemy disturbance. But Yuri couldn't do what he could, or rather, people in this world couldn't. Concurrent chanting required a calm and stable mind while fighting, using a technique similar to multitasking fighting while chanting magic. However, not only was the magic of this world not connected to the mind, but magicians in this world also generally lacked the ability for close combat. When facing enemies, they rely on their attendants to fend off enemies, buying time to chant magic and gradually transforming the magical energy stored in their gate into magic. Because of this, concurrent chanting couldn't be used by the magicians of this world. In fast-paced battles, they could only use combat class magic that could be quickly released, while tactical class magic and strategic class magic were of little use. Although Yuri was a strategic class magician, without the ability to use tactical class magic or strategic class magic, it was truly uncertain whether she could defeat her father using combat class magic alone. Fortunately, Riesel was overly worried. What do you think I've been doing since becoming a strategic class magician? Yuri rolled her eyes at him, then confidently smiled. Back when I just became a strategic class magician 2 years ago, it was indeed difficult to say, but now. Even if she didn't finish her sentence, Riesel understood. Yuri, who had taught him her magic before, constantly reminded him not to be complacent. As a strategic class magician with such an attitude, she obviously must also harbor doubts and constantly remind herself not to become complacent. After achieving the status of a strategic class magician, she must have devoted herself to enhancing her combat class magic. Especially the decomposition magic, a terrifying magic with devastating power, which she treated as her specialty. Once cast, this magic decomposed any object into nothingness. What could Alderman use to defend against such a formidable magic? With just the 2 of us alone, victory is definitely in our hands. Yuri stated confidently. However, Riesel wasn't as optimistic as her. The reason was simple. Will that swordsman who always followed behind your father also join the war festival? Riesel asked, eyeing her. That swordsman. Yuri paused for a moment, then shook her head, somewhat uncertain. I'm not sure, maybe. Maybe. Riesel asked, puzzled. Don't you know him? I don't. Yuri replied frankly, shaking her head. I've never seen him before. He must have been recently taken on as an attendant by my father. It was no wonder she believed so strongly in her victory. She had no idea that the closed-eyed swordsman who followed her father was powerful. However, instead of worry, Riesel's lips curved into a smirk, clearly excited. Wasn't this the perfect opportunity for a good fight? Chapter 120, Mysterious Swordsman. Riesel truly wanted to have a match with the mysterious closed-eyed swordsman who followed Alderman. After coming to this world, he could no longer rampage through the dungeon like before, and could only rely on practicing swordsmanship and magic to hone himself. In this world, he had only engaged in actual combat twice. One was against the burly sword master who ambushed him, and he easily won. The other was against several masked people who blocked him inside the Frenzel mansion, and he also easily defeated them. While those fights were satisfying, he still wanted an opponent who could match his strength. Fighting against such an opponent would allow him to gain more excelia, experience more growth, and ignite a sense of excitement within him, truly killing three birds with one stone. Since that mysterious swordsman gave him a feeling similar to facing Finn, Riveria, and Gareth, it indicated that this swordsman was at least equivalent to a level 6 adventurer. An opponent of this level was worthy of his full effort. Riesel hoped this swordsman would participate in the war festival so he could face him. He just didn't know whether this swordsman would appear in the first round or the third, but he hoped it would be the third. After finishing pondering the mysterious closed-eyed swordsman, Riesel looked at Yuri and asked another question. Who do you plan to send out for the first round? Marilyn. Yuri didn't need to answer this question since Marilyn herself was the one who answered. I'll go. Marilyn said calmly, though her expression showed uncertainty. But I probably won't win. Hey? Why? Riesel was somewhat surprised by her answer. Yuri took over from Marilyn. The first one to go on my father's side will probably be my elder brother, Faz. Yuri explained. Although my father has many attendants and knights, none of them have reached the level of a sword master yet. So, for the sake of winning, my father will definitely have my brother assist him. Oh. Riesel raised his brow. So your brother is a sword master? Yes. Yuri answered indifferently. In my family, only my father and I have the talent to become magicians. The rest of my siblings, including my mother, cannot perform magic due to insufficient magical energy and can only pursue the path of swordsmanship. However, Medist doesn't seem to have the aptitude for swordsmanship since she has never successfully mastered it. On the other hand, Isaac is too impulsive and reckless, often skipping swordsmanship classes. So, neither of them is at the level to call themselves swordsmen yet. Only my elder brother and elder sister have been practicing swordsmanship since childhood. Now both of them have achieved the title of sword master, especially my brother. He may seem frivolous, but he's a genius in swordsmanship. He obtained the title of sword master 5 years ago, and his strength is probably stronger than Marilyn, Anne, and Ian under normal circumstances. Yuri informed Riesel that Marilyn obtained the title of sword master 3 years ago, while Anne and Ian obtained it 1 year ago. Based solely on the time, these three couldn't compare to Faz. As long as he hadn't neglected his training in recent years, he wouldn't lose to Marilyn, Anne, and Ian. However, Riesel was more concerned about details Yuri mentioned subconsciously just now. What does she mean by normal circumstances? Riesel was about to ask this question in his mind when she suddenly spoke up again. You know, I've never really understood my elder brother. Yuri said, furrowing her brow. I always feel like he's hiding something. Ever since before, his actions have been suspicious, especially after my father handed over the family head position to me, causing my brother to lose his qualification as the family heir. He's become even more unpredictable since then, always out doing who knows what. As she spoke, her eyes betrayed deep suspicion and a hint of wariness. This fearless young lady, who feared neither heaven nor earth nor even the royal family, dared to retaliate against anything, had begun to harbor suspicions and wariness about her own elder brother. It seems like my father knows something but never tells me. He never even inquires about what my brother is up to or arranges any marriage for him, which is very suspicious. Yuri couldn't help but say a few more words, before shaking her head shortly after. But regardless, my brother still listens to my father and has always been by his side since childhood. My father should make him take action this time, so he will definitely show up. Yuri believed that her elder brother would be the first to act. The reason was simple. That's just the way he is. If someone entrusts him with something, he'll either try his best to avoid it or, if he can't, he'll quickly resolve it. He dislikes troublesome things after all. Why not let me go first then? Riesel became somewhat interested in fighting Cephas after Yuri's explanation. However, Yuri disagreed. Not worth it. Yuri shook her head. If you go out as a swordsman in the first round, you can't use magic. It's better to avoid situations where you can't give your all. Only swordsmen could participate in the first round, so if Riesel went out, he could have only used swords, not magic. The same went for the second round. If he went out, he could have only used magic, not swords. So naturally, Yuri didn't want to waste Riesel, such an excellent combat power, in other rounds, and wanted him to fight unrestricted in the third round. By now, everything had become very clear. The first round, Marilyn against Yuri's elder brother, she was likely to lose. The second round, Yuri against her father, she was confident she could win. So, does that mean, the outcomes depend on my performance in the third round, hey? As Riesel pondered that, he was unsure how to react. Or maybe, you do not need to fight at all. Yuri suddenly grinned. Perhaps my brother actually has neglected his swordsmanship over the years and lost to Marilyn. So, you wouldn't need to compete in the third round. This young lady truly had confidence in herself, believing she could win against her own father. In such a situation, Riesel didn't feel it appropriate to say something like, maybe we lost the first 2 rounds, so I won't have to compete either. Of course, with the situation becoming clearer, it dawned on him that he might indeed face off against that close-eyed swordsman. After all, according to Yuri's assessment, her brother would attend the first round, while her father would attend the second. Thus, in the third round, it was highly likely her father would send in that swordsman. Yuri was uncertain of the swordsman's strength, but her father surely knew. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought the swordsman along to the meeting of the Frenzel family, which was an internal matter. This demonstrated the swordsman's value, at least in her father's eyes. Yuri mentioned that under her father's command, there were no sword master attendants or knights. With this in mind, it was probable that her father had recently recruited this swordsman and kept him as a trump card for the final showdown. This realization only heightened Riesel's anticipation. Facing off against an opponent of equivalent strength to that of a level 6 adventurer would undoubtedly make for an exciting fight. While Riesel and Yuri were discussing the war festival, in a secluded alley of Undine, the mysterious closed-eyed swordsman, who had been on Riesel's mind recently, silently appeared. He still had his eyes closed and a sword at his waist as he walked confidently through the alley, heading towards the darkness. His pace was not quick, but rather slow, almost as if walking through a swamp, dragging one step at a time. As he walked, a few figures gradually approached him. "Hey, blind guy, what are you doing alone in a place like this?" A mocking voice rang out. "It's dangerous to walk alone at night, you know." Accompanied by such words, several dangerous-looking thugs emerged from the darkness and surrounded the swordsman, forcing him to stop. "Hey, blind guy, how about coughing up some money?" The leader of the thugs licked his lips, chuckling softly. "We're here to teach you a lesson, show you how sketchy these alleys get after dark. Handing over some money seems fair, don't you think?" Upon hearing that, the closed-eyed swordsman remained motionless. It was another thug who, upon seeing the sword hanging from the closed-eyed swordsman's waist, hastily spoke up. "Hey boss, watch out! This guy's got a sword. Maybe he's a swordsman." As soon as these words were spoken, the bodies of every thug tensed up. However, the leader still acted carelessly. Like, seriously, who cares if he's a swordsman? Who knows if this guy is just a trash swordsman practicing elementary swordsmanship? I mean, a truly powerful swordsman wouldn't be hanging out in sketchy alleys in the dead of night, right? Upon hearing their leader's words, the thugs instantly believed his words and relaxed. But at the same time, the closed-eyed swordsman finally spoke up. "Do you know what color blood is?" His voice was hoarse, sending chills down one's spine. However, without waiting for the thugs to respond, the closed-eyed swordsman spoke again. "Not knowing is okay, just take a look beneath you." Upon hearing that, every thug lowered their head. In that instant, they saw it. Red. A glaring red. There was no doubt, it was the color of blood. Click. A soft sound suddenly emerged. It was the closed-eyed swordsman, sheathing the sword he had unsheathed at some point. Only then did the thugs realize that just moments ago, unnoticed by everyone, this swordsman had drawn his sword and silently slashed them with his sword. "You! The leader of the thugs trembled, pointing his finger at the closed-eyed swordsman, then collapsed, his body bathed in blood. Thud 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 thud. The rest of the thugs followed suit, falling one after another into the pool of blood, losing their lives. It seems like even trash like you all bleed red too. The closed-eyed swordsman spoke calmly, squatting down and pressing his hand into the blood, looking at the red stain on his palm. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. He suddenly laughed, his laughter was as sinister as a malevolent demon's. Chapter 121, A Noble? Not in this lifetime. The next day, the Frenzel family became slightly livelier than usual. Because many people had received the news that in a few days, the Frenzel family would be hosting the War Festival. At first, many people were unfamiliar with the term War Festival and felt confused, not knowing what it was all about. The War Festival, which hadn't been held for decades, was suddenly announced to be brought back, so it was quite normal that many people hadn't caught on yet. It wasn't until aldermen vigorously began promoting the revival of the War Festival to enliven it that people finally understood what the War Festival was about. Now, the whole Frenzel territory was buzzing. Are Lady Yuri and Sir Alderman really going to join in this fighting competition? Yeah, sounds kinda interesting. It's been forever since the Frenzel territory had an event this lively. I'm getting pretty pumped. Many people were discussing it one after another in such a mood. However, aldermen didn't actually publicize the true significance of the War Festival. In other words, although people knew that Yuri and aldermen were preparing to participate in the fight, facing off against each other, they didn't know that the purpose of hosting the War Festival was to make the other party compromise to their demands. This was a conflict and decision-making within the direct line of the Frenzel family, and it wasn't convenient for those below and outsiders to know about it. Therefore, knowing about the War Festival's existence, people were simply looking forward to it and discussing it, but they didn't notice anything amiss. Only a few intelligent individuals clearly sensed an abnormality. Marquis Frenzel caused quite a stir in the royal capital, and now she suddenly set up this War Festival thingy. The Baisalo family is pretty hostile toward the Frenzel family right now. With Sir Alderman's way of doing things, shouldn't he try to ease the tensions between them first? It's not that simple. There must be something we don't know about. Let's find out then. The people who reacted like this were either some nobles or spies sent by certain countries or members of some mysterious force who had been deliberately monitoring the movements of the Frenzel family. They keenly sensed that there was more to this and began to take action in secret. Moreover, believe it or not, they actually found the answer. After all, the War Festival was once a tradition of the Frenzel family. While today's people might not understand and know its purpose, an observant and knowledgeable one would surely find out how the Frenzel family used to hold the War Festival and why it existed. This wasn't some particularly significant secret, anyone with a bit of influence could investigate and surely find out. Thanks to this, they learned the reason behind the revival of the War Festival. It appears Marquis Frenzel and Sir Alderman have reached an irreconcilable conflict. Is it due to the marriage with the Baisalo family? Definitely worth keeping an eye on. With ulterior motives in mind, these people began to act one after another. Even those who were previously indifferent to the affairs of the Frenzel family showed considerable interest in the War Festival itself. This is a great opportunity to get a close look at the strength of the Frenzel family. Since strategic class magician Yuri Frenzel will also participate, it might be the only chance to see her power up close. The War Festival is open to the public, right? When does it start? And so, whether ordinary people or those with ulterior motives, turned their attention to the War Festival. The Frenzel family did not conceal any information and directly broadcast relevant news. The War Festival was a celebration, a tradition, and naturally, it would not be conducted in secrecy. It was completely open to anyone, but if one wished to watch, one needed to buy a ticket. Alderman's decision to revive the War Festival and hold it in Undine's largest training field was carefully calculated. The training field was typically used for training knights, and magicians also practiced magic there, making it a venue capable of withstanding all kinds of fights, as long as tactical class and strategic class magic weren't released, of course. Moreover, the field also had audience seats with a modest capacity of about 5,000 people, which was sufficient. Alderman planned to sell tickets for 4,400 of these seats to the public, allowing anyone with tickets to enter and watch the War Festival. As for the remaining 600 seats, they were reserved for special invitations. He seemed to be preparing to invite the local nobles from the Frenzel territory to watch the War Festival, even planning to invite some dignitaries to attend. It was clear that he was determined to make the war festival grand and lively, a high-class event, which truly made Yuri feel displeased. I feel like he's using me. Did he plan to revive the war festival from the start? Yuri couldn't help but suspect, venting her frustrations to Riesel. Riesel hadn't anticipated that this so-called war festival would end up becoming so widely known. After all, he wasn't particularly fond of being in the limelight, reluctant to be evaluated and scrutinized in public. Most importantly, this would likely expose his true power once and for all. After all, before this, everyone had treated him like a useless cripple. However, upon further thought, he honestly felt indifferent. Well, I've already become famous in the royal capital anyway. As Riesel thought that, he honestly couldn't wrap his head around it. Yuri seemed to have been keeping tabs on developments in the royal capital and finally got wind of information that his status as a tactical class magician had been widely known. Now, any noble with half a brain already knew that Yuri actually had a tactical class magician by her side, and that person was none other than him. He had recently been rumored to have lost his ability to use magic because of his damaged gait and had to resort to mastering swordsmanship. This rumor inevitably made many people secretly curse Yuri for her cunningness. To think that a tactical class magician had been quietly recruited by her and then portrayed as a cripple hiding away. Had it not been for the Basalo family's farce, exposing this secret card that the Frenzel family had deliberately concealed, one might have fallen victim to this deception. The royal family seemed quite concerned about this matter as well, so upon contacting Yuri, they wasted no time in urging her to return to the royal capital and bring Riesel along. The reason, of course, was to bestow a noble title upon Riesel. Any tactical class magician could be received by the king in the royal palace and be granted a noble title in front of the nobles. Moreover, it wasn't the lowest rank of baron, but a step higher of viscount. For tactical class magicians, once ennobled, the lowest rank was always a viscount. For those like them, if they could achieve some merit on the battlefield, they would immediately be promoted to the rank of count and become major nobles. As for strategic class magicians, if they managed to achieve it and didn't have a noble title, they would immediately become major nobles by being granted the title of count. On the other hand, if they already had a noble title, they were unconditionally promoted by 1 or even 2 ranks on the spot. Yuri had been such a case. As she became a strategic class magician at the age of 15, she directly ascended from viscount to marquis, achieving a 2-rank promotion in an instant. Now that Riesel's status as a tactical class magician had been exposed, the royal family naturally wished for him to return post-haste, bestow a noble title upon him, and directly imprint him with Genus's mark to prevent other countries from poaching him. When Yuri told Riesel about this, she even apologized, saying she hadn't expected the news to spread so widely, resulting in the entire noble circle being aware of it now. What Riesel couldn't understand was this. How did it get exposed anyway? At that time, after the knights and guards had already suppressed the slave invasion, all of them, including the servants, had taken refuge in the basement under Yuri's instructions. In other words, logically speaking, nobody should have known about him using Arie Leavitian. So how did this get exposed? Was there an outsider witnessing me casting Arie Leavitian at that time? Riesel expressed doubt. If that were the case, then this person was quite lucky. If a tactical class-wide area annihilation magic had been unleashed without a tactical class barrier to block it, the entire vicinity of the Frenzel residence would have likely turned into a sea of flames. For this person to stay within the barrier, within the range of Arie Leavitian, and still survive, they either had some skills or were just incredibly lucky. Riesel sighed at this thought, then stopped dwelling on it. If the exposure happened, it happened. He wouldn't die from it anyway, at most, he would just become the target of assassination again. But in a way, he actually welcomed it. As long as they didn't send someone on the level of a sword saint to deal with him, these assassins, no matter how many came, would only serve to increase his exelia. Of course, he had no intention of returning to the royal capital and accepting any noble titles or positions the kingdom might offer. In his previous life, he had suffered enough persecution in that world full of conspiracy and deceit among the upper society. Now that he had finally distanced himself from that world and gained freedom, there was no way he would go back to it. A noble? Not in this lifetime. As a result, Riesel told Yuri about his decision. I had a feeling you would say that. Okay, don't worry, I'll do my best to delay and make excuses for you. Yuri took on this task seriously. However, as news of him spread, Riesel found himself being pestered by others as well. One day, just as he was about to practice magic as usual, he was intercepted by someone who suddenly appeared. "Teach me magic." Speaking with such an air of arrogance was none other than, "It's you, the brat, I mean, the youngest child." Looking at Isaac, who had suddenly popped up, Riesel couldn't help but blurt out, "Who are you calling a brat? Also, I already told you I'm not the youngest child, damn it." Isaac jumped up and shouted in anger, "You insolent fellow! Address me as young master." Seeing him behaving like an annoying noble brat again, Riesel couldn't help but feel the urge to give him another knock on his head. "Are you sure you want me to call you young master?" Riesel said while clenching his fist tightly. "Forget it, I won't argue with you." Seeing that familiar fist, the ever-flexible Isaac ultimately chose to magnanimously forgive Riesel's impoliteness. "However, but you have to teach me magic," Isaac continued to insist, leaving Riesel puzzled. Chapter 122, Magic Crystal? You want to become a magician? With raised eyebrows, Riesel asked Isaac, who stood in front of him. "Day." Isaac rolled his eyes and spoke with no trace of politeness. "Who doesn't want to become a magician?" "Well, that's true," Riesel admitted in his heart. In this world, being a magician symbolized nobility, symbolized status, and without a doubt, many people aspired to it. Like the original Riesel, dreaming of becoming a tactical class magician, gaining a noble status, and being honored as a noble, it was safe to say that there were plenty of people like him. Even noble descendants hoped to become magicians themselves, especially tactical class or strategic class magicians. However, reality was obviously more cruel than they imagined. Your elder sister said that only she and your father in the entire family have the talent to become magicians, while you, due to insufficient magical energy, can only pursue the path of a swordsman. Don't you know about this? Riesel asked with a puzzled tone. Yes. It was this matter that made him puzzled. Logically, Isaac should know about this since he was already attending swordsmanship classes. Even if no one told him, he should have guessed that he didn't have the talent to become a magician, right? It was truly perplexing that Isaac suddenly wanted him to teach magic. "I'm sure my father and elder sister have mistaken me, maybe I happen to have the talent to become a magician, they just haven't noticed it yet." When saying that, Isaac looked resolute and unwilling to accept defeat, but Riesel keenly noticed a hint of unwillingness in his eyes. Apparently, this 9-year-old boy refused to believe in reality. It was understandable. At Isaac's age, how could he understand that talent was something inborn and unchangeable? At this age, Isaac certainly wouldn't be convinced by evaluations from elders. He wouldn't believe that if someone said it was not possible, then it was not possible. Even if it was true, he must be an exception. This was a mindset shared by people of his age. Perhaps, he also wanted to prove to his father and elder sister that they were wrong and that he could actually become a magician. I see. It's probably because of this that you keep avoiding swordsmanship classes and never seriously study swordsmanship, hey? Riesel seemed to understand Isaac's behavior now, and indeed, it seemed to be the case. "I don't want to learn swordsmanship and become a swordsman," Isaac said with disdain. "I want to become a powerful magician, like my elder sister, honored by the kingdom, and make our family stronger and more stronger. Swordsmanship classes are pointless." Sure enough, this boy avoided studying swordsmanship and attending swordsmanship classes for this reason. But still, reality was cruel. Listen, to become a magician, having enough magical energy to cast magic is the bare minimum. Even if you dream of becoming a magician, if you don't have the necessary magical energy, you won't be able to cast a single magic. Riesel explained, choosing not to deceive the boy, thus revealing the harsh reality. However, his explanation seemed to ignite Isaac's rebellious spirit. "Are you going to say the same thing as my father and elder sister?" Isaac shouted. "I don't care. Just teach me what you need to, whether I succeed or not is my concern, not yours." "That's a valid point. Whether you learn or not is up to you, I shouldn't get in your way." Riesel acknowledged his words, but shortly afterward, turned his gaze to his eyes. "But whether I teach you or not is my concern too, no. You." Isaac became infuriated instantly. Being a noble, if he had demands, others should comply with them, that was how things worked within his family. Why did this guy really like to go against him? Did this man really think he was so great just because he had his elder sister to protect him? He admitted that this guy was indeed somewhat impressive, but even after he had humbly begged like this guy still refused. This guy was truly a damn scoundrel. There was no other choice, he would have to resort to a last-ditch effort. I can give you money. I'm not short on money for now. I can give you my precious magic items. I don't want any magic items for now. I can introduce you to women. I don't need a woman for now. Also, please stop that, you're starting to sound like a wicked and nasty young master. What do you have to be dissatisfied about? I'd like to ask you back, based on what you've said, do I have anything to be satisfied about? In that case, how about I give you a magic crystal that can record images? It also contains scenes of my 3 elder sisters bathing. Pass. It must be said that for the sake of learning magic, Isaac was truly willing to go all out, willing to use anything as bargaining chips. Riesel's gaze at this boy became increasingly strange, feeling like there was something off about him, yet also seemingly normal in every way. This feeling was quite odd, but it didn't stop him from seeing Isaac as a troublemaker brat. Luckily, Riesel didn't need to intervene, this boy was about to face consequences on his own. So that's how it is. A magic crystal that can record images, is it? A voice, sounding as though it emerged from hell, suddenly echoed behind Isaac. I've never heard of such a thing. Shouldn't you explain this to me properly, Isaac? As the voice resonated, Isaac, who was about to reach into his pocket to take out the so-called magic crystal, froze entirely. He showed a frightened expression, and shortly afterward, the terror on his face turned into despair. Pack! A hand forcefully slammed onto Isaac's shoulder, grabbing hold of him, and preventing his escape. Medist's face appeared behind Isaac, her slightly childish yet exceptionally beautiful face frosted over with coldness, darkness swirling in her eyes. It seems like the two of us need to have a serious talk, don't you think, Isaac? Medist's voice was particularly cold and terrifying. Isaac let out a sound akin to a broken doll, a voice resembling that of a dying man. At that moment, delicate and fair hands swiftly clasped around his neck. Crack! The next second, Isaac's neck twisted almost 90 degrees, emitting a bone-cracking sound, his eyes rolling back as he collapsed to the ground. My apologies, Mr. Riesel. Medist appeared from behind Isaac and bowed her head to Riesel. My brother seems to have lost his senses, speaking nonsense. Please forget what he just said, and accept my deepest gratitude. After uttering those undoubtedly emotionless words, she raised her head, her gaze and expression both seemed to have lost their luster. Then, I'll take my leave. Seeing Medist's eyes devoid of their usual brilliance, Riesel was somewhat taken aback. Yeah, take care. Riesel could only respond awkwardly. Then, excuse me. Medist bowed her head once again and turned to leave. However, she still held Isaac's nape in her hand, dragging her younger brother directly toward the other end of the corridor. In Riesel's eyes, it seemed as if a large predatory animal was dragging its prey into a corner to devour it. Frenzel family's women are truly terrifying. Whether it was Yuri or Medist, neither of them was to be trifled with. Lost in thought, Riesel didn't realize that the turned-away Medist was currently feeling somewhat devastated. Perhaps it was because of the matter her father mentioned to her last night. I'm planning to marry you off to Riesel Brynhart. Be prepared at all times. Her father's absolute words lingered in her brain, leaving her with a complex mix of emotions. As a result, for a short while, Medist didn't dare to meet Riesel. As for shocks or resistance, surprisingly, she didn't show any. Surprise? What was there to be surprised about? Her father was always like this, and she knew it long ago. She had mentally prepared herself for her marriage arrangement long ago, so nothing was surprising. Resistance? How could she resist? Her two elder sisters had the ability to resist, but pitifully, she didn't. After all, she wasn't like her eldest sister, skilled in swordsmanship, or like her second eldest sister, who was a great magician. She was just an ordinary girl. With her abilities, what could she do to resist? Let alone herself, even her eldest sister who was a sword master could only resist their father with their mother's support. Otherwise, her eldest sister alone wouldn't be able to resist their father at all. Only her second eldest sister, Yuri, truly possessed the ability and privilege to resist their father solely with her own power. Because of this, she admired her second eldest sister the most and aspired to become someone like her. Unfortunately, she could only dream, since she was the most useless daughter in this family. Obeying marriage arrangements obediently and living a somewhat happy life was the best future she could hope for. With such complicated emotions, Metis dragged Isaac away. Meanwhile, Riesel, who remained oblivious to her thoughts, watched as Metis hurriedly left with her younger brother. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he noticed an item on the ground. Magic crystal. Riesel raised his eyebrows and picked it up. The crystal-shaped item that had fallen to the ground looked very similar to the communication magic crystal he had received from Yuri, so he immediately recognized it as some kind of magic crystal. Did this fall from that brat? Suddenly, he remembered what Isaac said earlier and realized what thing contained in this magic crystal was. As a result, he fell into a long silence. I'll just keep it for now. After a long time, Riesel quietly tucked the magic crystal into his pocket and left the scene. As for what kind of cruel interrogation and punishment Isaac would face from his elder sister for losing the magic crystal afterward, that had nothing to do with him. Chapter 123, Grand Opening. In the blink of an eye, a week had passed. On this day, the war festival hosted by the Frenzel family was officially announced open, making the city of Undine much livelier than usual. Citizens pointed and gestured in the direction of the training field, which served as the arena for the fight, seemingly discussing the war festival. One carriage after another proceeded in the same direction, most likely heading to the training field. Outside the training field, the Frenzel family's people stood guard. Some were responsible for maintaining security and order, others for guiding and collecting entrance tickets, while some welcomed VIPs arriving in luxurious carriages, allowing everyone with tickets to enter one after another. In such a scenario, Riesel's group also arrived quietly. They remained the same old members, with Riesel, Yuri, Marilyn, Anne, and Ian, the group of 5, walking together without any other members. On the opposite side, the lineup was quite grand. Apart from Alderman, Cephas, and the mysterious closed-eyed swordsman, many knights and attendants were accompanying them. At first glance, Riesel's group seemed somewhat outnumbered, but the attention of most people was actually focused on them. Is that Marquis Yuri Frenzel? Those 3 women behind her, are they all her attendants? I heard they're all sword masters. Amazing. Each one is so beautiful. Yet, people started discussing one after another enthusiastically, while Alderman's group, despite appearing more grand, didn't attract much attention. It couldn't be helped. Alderman's group was mostly men, and their fame wasn't high either, except for Cephas himself being a sword master. The others weren't well known, including Alderman himself. Of course, when mentioning fame, it referred to strength. People recognized Alderman as the former head of the Frenzel family, but in the end, he was just a combat class magician. He wasn't even a tactical class, let alone a strategic class magician. As a result, his support in this festival focused on combat wasn't very high. On the other hand, in Riesel's group, Yuri herself was one of the continent's only 8 strategic class magicians, while Marilyn, Anne, and Ian were all sword masters. Although they were fewer in number, each one was elite, and of course, beautiful. After all, people were visual creatures, naturally more inclined to pay attention to something or someone beautiful, so it was understandable for their group to be more popular. Even Riesel himself sparked considerable discussion. That's Riesel Brynhart, right? At one of the specially invited seats, a young nobleman dressed in finery turned to his attendant beside him for confirmation. Yes, he is indeed Riesel Brynhart. The attendant respectfully replied. Quite young, hey? The young nobleman remarked. Becoming a tactical class magician at such a young age. While not quite on par with Marquis Frenzel, he's certainly stronger than most tactical class magicians in the kingdom. No wonder the royal palace's people insisted I abandon all my work and rush over here just to bring this young man back for ennoblement. This young nobleman had come from the royal capital, traveling a long distance. Apart from him, there were many other VIPs in the special seats, each with their own purposes. Riesel was the focus of attention for many, with some even coming specifically for him. Is he the tactical class magician mentioned in the intelligence report, the one who hasn't been ennobled yet? Yes, that's him. Good, let's find an opportunity to approach him and see if we can recruit him to our country before Genas gets their claws on him. In corners of the audience seats, whispers like these were happening, as if darkness pervaded everywhere. And so, the opening time of the war festival arrived right on time. In the center of the training field, the 2 sides about to face off finally met. Are you ready? Alderman looked at his daughter standing opposite him, asking without any expression. Let's get started already. Yuri didn't waste any words, simply dropping this statement before turning to walk back with the others. Riesel lagged behind, his gaze involuntarily flicking to the closed-eyed swordsman standing behind Alderman. But after gazing at the closed-eyed swordsman, he suddenly frowned. "What's wrong?" Yuri noticed his unease and asked in a lowered voice. "Haven't you noticed?" Riesel continued to frown, looking at the closed-eyed swordsman. "There seems to be some sort of change in him." "Really?" Yuri seemed not to have noticed. Not only her, but Marilyn, Anne, and Ian also seemed not to have noticed any anomaly. Only Riesel had a feeling that something had changed about the closed-eyed swordsman. The closed-eyed swordsman's aura became somewhat dangerous, somewhat horrifying. When Riesel first saw this closed-eyed swordsman, he felt like he was facing powerful experts like Finn, Riveria, or Gareth. Now, the feeling he got from this closed-eyed swordsman was more like facing a floor boss, full of oppression and terrifying monster-like presence. Although the feeling of power remained just as strong, perhaps even stronger than before, the change in the closed-eyed swordsman made him feel more hostile and filled with bloodlust. Strangely, he felt an urge to immediately cut down the closed-eyed swordsman, which made no sense and left him quite puzzled. "All right, don't think too much about it." Yuri patted his shoulder. "Whatever it is, let's talk after the war festival is over." Riesel nodded, taking one more deep look at the closed-eyed swordsman before following Yuri and the others, leaving the center of the training field. On the other hand, Alderman remained in the center and chanted a magic. It was a small magic that amplified his voice to deliver the opening speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you gathered here today. I am deeply grateful for your presence at our Frenzel family's war festival." As Alderman's voice reverberated loudly, the audience immediately quieted down. War festival has been a tradition of our Frenzel family since its birth, once widely known. Unfortunately, we, the later generations, have been incapable of maintaining the brilliance of our ancestors. Eventually, this tradition faded away, not mentioned for decades. Now, the Frenzel family finally has the opportunity to reclaim some of its former glory, and it's time for the revival of this family tradition. Today, I, Alderman Frenzel, along with the family head, will recreate the war festival, hoping that our ancestors will bless our family and restore its past glory. After Alderman delivered the opening speech, he didn't waste much time and went straight to the point. The rules of the war festival are as follows. Alderman announced the rules of the war festival to the audience, which included 3 rounds with 2 victories needed to win, consisting of 3 fights with specific limitations on participants for each round, and so on. Additionally, he made a special reminder. The war festival is a tradition, a ritual. As such, it strictly forbids both sides from seriously harming their opponents, let alone killing them. Any violation of the safety regulations, regardless of which side, will be punished by the Frenzel family, even if it's me or my daughter, who is the family head. As for determining the winner, it will be based on destroying the medals worn by the participants. After saying that, Alderman took out a medal and wore it on his left shoulder. Participants from both sides must wear this medal on their left shoulder. Once one side's medal is destroyed, victory will be decided, and the one who destroys it will claim the win. Additionally, once a participant has taken part in a round, they cannot participate again. Each participant is only allowed to participate once. These were roughly the rules, with the rest being just some precautions, such as the training field employing barrier magic to protect the audience when the fight began, so the audience didn't need to worry about being affected by the fights. Now, each side, please send out a swordsman to participate in the first round of swordsman. After declaring that, Alderman left the center of the training field, and not long after, someone from his side entered. "Good afternoon, everyone." Faz stepped onto the center of the training field, waving and greeting all around. His performance was akin to a football player entering the field, which indeed drew cheers from the audience, especially the teenage girls. "Kya? Kya? Young Master Faz." When they saw the first participant to enter was the handsome Faz, they all screamed one after another. It must be said that the genes of the Frenzel family were indeed excellent. Handsome men and beautiful women, not a single one was mediocre. They were much better looking than the celebrities from Riesel's previous life. As expected, the first one to enter is my elder brother. Yuri murmured as she watched her elder brother waving to the audience while approaching the center of the training field. "I'll go," Marilyn said calmly. Go ahead." Yuri nodded. "Don't force yourself, just do your best." "Understood." Marilyn bowed her head slightly, then calmly walked toward the center of the training field. Whistle! Whistle! The stunning maid made a bold entrance, this time prompting a chorus of wolf whistles from the men. Are you my opponent? Faz looked at Marilyn across from him and chuckled. This could be tricky. Lie. Marilyn spoke without a trace of politeness. You clearly don't think I could be your opponent. Then you've misunderstood me. Faz shrugged casually. If you unleash your family's specialty and use that swordsmanship, you would definitely be one of the opponents I least want to face. Upon hearing that, Marilyn remained calm and quietly took out her weapon. Come. Her calm and indifferent voice made Faz reveal a meaningful smile as he unsheathed the sword hanging from his waist. In this manner, the first round of the war festival had finally begun. Chapter 124, Alderman's Self-Confidence. In Undine's largest training field, cheers erupted without stopping, echoing through the air since the beginning of the fight. Just from the cheers alone, one could tell how thrilling the fight being held in the training field truly was. The sword clash between Marilyn and Faz heated up the atmosphere right from the beginning. Clang, cling, clang, cling. Amidst the intense clashing of swords, two figures inside the training field continuously weaved and collided, causing sparks and gusts of wind to burst forth. Marilyn and Faz moved around the training field like streams of light, sometimes chasing each other, sometimes crossing paths, sometimes changing positions, and sometimes engaging in fierce clashes. After images and sword flashes kept appearing, and the sound of sword clashes was constant, showcasing extraordinary speed and intense fighting. To get a clear view of the fight between the two, many magicians had already used magic to enhance their vision, while the others had the latest model magic items at their disposal, allowing everyone to barely make out the thrilling duel between Marilyn and Faz, resulting in waves of cheers. Riesel's eyes were also fixed on the training field, taking in every detail of the fight between Marilyn and Faz. Even from his perspective, the fight between these two had a lot of attraction. Especially Marilyn, who had always been Yuri's quiet maid in the background, now revealed her strength, which surprised him. Marilyn wasn't using typical swords, but a pair of thin short swords resembling twin swords from some movies he had watched in his previous life. She was like an assassin, gripping her swords in reverse, with each movement of her elbow producing a sword flash, enveloping Faz in a barrage of sword slashes like a net. Her attack speed was surprisingly fast, and her attack angles were unusually tricky, giving a sense of being undefendable. Her speed was also remarkable, as if her movements had been meticulously studied, with a unique charm in every move and glide. If it weren't for Riesel's keen battle instincts, he might have lost sight of Marilyn several times due to her peculiar movements, fluttering like leaves in the wind. From this, it could be seen that she was more inclined toward an agility and technique-oriented swordsman. Although her attack power wasn't great, it was compensated by the terrifying number of attacks woven together by her attack speed. Faced with such opponents, even a slight mistake could result in being slashed dozens or even hundreds of times in an instant, leading to instant defeat. Based on this performance alone, Riesel was certain. Marilyn's strength, even compared to Ace, probably isn't much different. His evaluation of Marilyn was this high, indicating just how strong she was. Unlike Anne and Ian, who were equal to level 5 with the lowest latent basic abilities, Marilyn's strength was not much inferior even when compared to a prodigy like Ace. At least, without using aerial, it wouldn't be easy for Ace to take down Marilyn. This maid truly lived up to the reputation of Yuri's strongest attendant, as an ordinary sword master wouldn't stand a chance against her. It was just a pity that Marilyn, such as she was, encountered a tough opponent. Marilyn is about to lose. As Riesel clearly observed the fight, facing Marilyn's storm-like assault, Faz had been on the defensive, but he clearly had more to give. His face still wore a somewhat cheeky smile as he wielded a typical Western-style sword. Even though it was clearly a sword, in Faz's hands, it seemed to transform into a whip, twisting and turning like willow branches, its trajectory unpredictable. Yet, despite this swordplay, it precisely blocked all of Marilyn's fierce sword attacks, protecting his entire body, never letting her slash come within a meter of his body. Marilyn kept pressing forward, slashing relentlessly and always accelerating, making her sword attacks denser and the slashes more frequent. Even so, Faz could still protect himself flawlessly, deflecting every one of her sword slashes aimed at his left shoulder multiple times with flicks from his sword, only sparking off flame particles in the end. Compared to Marilyn's display of swordsmanship, Faz seemed unremarkable, yet for some reason, she couldn't land a single effective attack on him. Sifaz's performance not only made some knowledgeable audience solemn but also made Riesel look deeply at this eldest son of the Frenzel family. Sifaz Frenzel, this guy's strength is probably not far from level 6. As Yuri and Marilyn had previously speculated, this man's strength was not to be underestimated, surpassing Marilyn by far. Riesel admitted to himself that even if he were to step in, he wouldn't be able to defeat Sifaz without going in earnest. However, what made Sifaz terrifying was that from his confident and casual attitude, it could be seen that he still held back some strength, not revealing it all. Interesting. Riesel held Sifaz in high regard, while the audience was extremely satisfied, finding the fight thrilling. Such an intense fight lasted for a full 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, Marilyn began to feel her stamina waning, with noticeable declines in both movement and attack speed. It seemed like Sifaz had been waiting for this split-second opportunity. It seems I've won. Sifaz, whose aura hadn't shown any signs of instability, seized the opportunity while Marilyn gasped for breath and her stamina was depleted, thrusting out his sword. Whoosh! This thrust was much faster than any of his previous attacks, flashing across the training field like a ray of light, leaving Marilyn unable to react. When she finally reacted, the metal on her left shoulder had already cracked in half, falling to the ground. The first round goes to Sir Alderman. The announcer's voice rang out right away, announcing the result of the first round of the War Festival. Marilyn stopped moving and looked at the broken metal on the ground while panting. After a moment, she raised her head, and her eyes showed a disturbing fluctuation of mysterious power. Oi, calm down. Sifaz quickly raised his hands in surrender. I don't want to get into a serious fight with you, or I'd die. Please spare me, okay? His plea made the mysterious power in Marilyn's eyes disappear. Humph! Marilyn coldly snorted, then turned away from the training field, eliciting applause from the audience. What a scary woman! Sifaz, with a hint of playfulness, patted his chest before turning back to Alderman's side. Well done, Sifaz! Alderman praised as his son returned. You flatter me. Sifaz waved off. Can I focus on watching the show now? Up to you. Alderman replied indifferently. Just remember, you can't leave until the War Festival is over. Yes, Sifaz responded nonchalantly. Meanwhile, Marilyn returned to Yuri's side to apologize. I'm sorry for losing, my lady. Even though she was apologizing, her tone and expression strangely remained calm. It's okay. Yuri shook her head. It was as expected. Anne and Ian quickly approached. You worked hard. You're getting stronger. The two female knights generously comforted and praised Marilyn. On the other hand, although Riesel didn't speak, he glanced at her a few times. Marilyn didn't say another word, silently returning to stand behind Yuri, resuming her role as the silent and reserved maid. At this moment, Yuri stood up. It's my turn. Yuri's voice had just fallen when the announcer's voice sounded outside. Next, each side is to send out a magician to participate in the second round of Battle of Magicians. Upon hearing the announcer's words, everyone turned to look at Yuri. My lady, be careful. Go for it, my lady. Anne and Ian spoke up in succession. Good luck. Riesel added, offering his encouragement. Don't worry. Yuri replied with a smile, stepping onto the center of the training field with calm and confident strides. It's Marquis Frenzel. Marquis Frenzel is entering. Kya? Lady Yuri. In the audience seats, bursts of cheers and screams erupt, fully showcasing Yuri's high popularity. After all, she was the publicly recognized head of the Frenzel family and lord of the Frenzel territory. She was young, beautiful, brimming with talent, renowned worldwide, and known to everyone. As one of the continent's only 8 strategic class magicians, solely by this status alone, her popularity would never be low, perhaps even the highest among the War Festival's participants. Compared to her, the audience's response was rather lackluster when Alderman made his entrance. He himself seemed unconcerned, squinting his eyes as he looked at his daughter walking into the center of the training field. It wasn't until this moment that he realized his daughter seemed to have grown quite a bit. In such a situation, Alderman couldn't help but speak up. You've already lost the first round. As long as I win this second round, you'll be completely defeated. No one knew his intention in saying that. Do you think I'll lose? Yuri calmly faced her father, whom she didn't particularly like, yet a rare smile appeared on her face. Indeed, you're certainly talented, much more so than I am. After saying that, Alderman remained silent for a while, and shortly afterward continued with indifference. But in a situation where you can't use tactical class magic or strategic class magic, do you think you can defeat me, who has spent decades studying combat class magic? Due to lacking the magic compatibility to become a tactical class magician, Alderman had spent the past few decades focusing on studying combat class magic. With the combat class magic expertise honed over many years of intense study, he simply couldn't imagine losing to his daughter, who couldn't use tactical class or strategic class magic in this war festival. In this war festival, the ultimate victor will be me, Alderman declared confidently. Unfortunately, he was bound to be disappointed. Boom! When a burst of purple vortex passed his body like a hurricane, landing on the ground near him and completely disintegrating it into nothingness, the confidence on his face froze. The entire training field fell silent. Everyone was shocked, watching the center of the training field, watching Yuri emanating purple fluctuations all over her body. Unfortunately, I can't see where your chance of winning lies. Yuri's voice echoed throughout the training field. Alderman wordlessly stared at his daughter across from him, a bead of sweat dripping down his forehead, as obvious as it could be. An unequal one-sided fight was about to unfold. Chapter 125, Checkmate. As a magician, Alderman lacked the compatibility to become a tactical class magician, but his magic compatibility was not poor by any means. With 4th grade compatibility in the transformation system and control system, as well as 1st grade compatibility in the interference system and structure system, his magic compatibility was indeed outstanding, just a step away from tactical class magician compatibility. Although this step seemed like a heavenly ridge and impossible to overcome, the path of a magician could still be described as smooth sailing for Alderman with 4th grade compatibility in the transformation and control systems. Because of this, he immediately took splendid action at the beginning of the second round. First, he chanted defensive magic at the fastest speed, raising a barrier. In a battle between magicians, casting a magic defense barrier was the first action any magician would take, allowing oneself to withstand the opponent's magic attack while also buying time to chant other magic to counterattack. If the opponent were a swordsman, the first thing to do would be to create distance or force them to retreat and find a way to cast a physical defensive barrier that would place oneself in a safe environment. Afterward, one could slowly chant powerful magic that could determine the battle's outcome. Needless to say, if the opponent were a magician, the physical defense barrier would be almost useless since the magic defense barrier would be the most practical choice. As for defensive magic that simultaneously possessed both physical and magic defense effects, such magic did not exist in combat class magic, only in tactical class magic could one find such a perfect combination. Therefore, judging which type of defensive magic to use in combat was essential for a combat class magician who could not afford any mistakes. Alderman took impeccable action by swiftly erecting a magic defense barrier and chanting magic from the control system, summoning 2 earth puppets from the ground in front of him. These 2 earth puppets were about 2 meters tall, bulky in size, resembling small giants. The moment they were summoned, they immediately stepped forward and charged toward Yuri. At this moment, Alderman had already started chanting another magic from the transformation system, preparing to attack her with large-scale, high-powered elemental magic while his earth puppets tangled Yuri. All of this happened within a matter of seconds. Since the beginning of the fight, Alderman had been chanting magic fluidly, completing 3 actions in one breath, raising a magic defense barrier, summoning earth puppets, and attaching attributes to his magical energy for the elemental magic attack. His use of combat class magic became incredibly natural and swift, a demonstration of excellence without exaggeration. It could be said that Alderman's series of actions, even if written into textbooks, would have no problems whatsoever. However, a problem arose here. If things continue like this, Sir Alderman might not be able to win. On the specially invited seats, the young nobleman from the royal capital sighed after just a glance at the battle before making such an evaluation. The young nobleman's attendant nearby was quite engrossed, even finding Alderman's smooth flow of magic usage impressive. However, upon hearing his master's words, he was stunned. Why? I thought Sir Alderman's performance was brilliant. It was brilliant indeed. The young nobleman didn't deny it, but he still didn't look favorably upon Alderman. His fighting style is too rigid. Being textbook-level exemplary might sound like high praise, but to some, it was worthy of criticism. Because combat was ever-changing, what actions to take in a battle couldn't simply be copied from textbook content. Alderman's mastery of magic was proficient, even remarkable. He could consecutively cast 3 different types of magic systems in a short time, seamlessly convert magical energy, and effortlessly cast magic without any difficulty. Such mastery of magic is something that even many tactical class magicians and strategic class magicians couldn't achieve. Yet, the young nobleman still shook his head in apparent regret. However, mastering the technique of using magic is one thing, using it in combat is another. The following events would prove his point. Facing Alderman's textbook-level magic usage, Yuri remained calm from start to finish and also took action the moment he did. However, unlike him, who cast a magic defense barrier first to protect himself, she stood there chanting magic without using any defense barrier. "Foolish daughter!" Alderman exclaimed loudly. "As a magician, how can you not first think of using defensive magic? What are you even thinking?" Yuri's approach was akin to standing completely defenseless in front of her opponent. Not to mention Alderman's forthcoming release of powerful elemental magic, even a punch from his charging earth puppets would have left her severely injured. After all, magicians were not like swordsmen who trained their bodies. Even a hit from an ordinary person could cause prolonged pain. For magicians, engaging in combat without using defensive magic was akin to inviting death. Yet, Yuri remained silent, even closed her eyes, and continued chanting her magic without care. Suddenly, the change began. Boom! Just as the 2 earth puppets were about to reach Yuri, the ground beneath them suddenly exploded, swallowing them into 2 large pits. A trap! Alderman's pupils contracted, but he didn't stop chanting and continued with his magic chant. He still had a magic defense barrier, which could withstand Yuri's magic attack a few times. Even if the feigned attack of his earth puppets failed, he should still have enough time to cast his magic successfully. As he thought like that, Alderman completely failed to anticipate that the magic Yuri would unleash next was not specifically for him. Boom! As the familiar purple vortex flashed, the ground beneath Alderman's feet vanished, becoming a pit. Indeed, the magic Yuri released wasn't aimed at him but rather at his foothold. Ah! Alderman felt a lightness beneath his feet and let out a startled cry as he tumbled into the pit. Not only was his magic chanting interrupted but he was also left in a state of dizziness. His magic defense barrier couldn't defend against physical damage as this fall alone nearly broke his bones. As Alderman tried to get up, Yuri's voice rang out at just the right moment, reaching his ears. "The way you use magic is as rigid and old-fashioned as you are. You really lack flexibility and adaptability. Even if you study combat class magic for decades, your combat ability won't improve much." After saying that, Yuri successfully unleashed her next magic. It was a swamp magic. Alderman, lying in the pit, suddenly found his surroundings becoming soft. Rocks turned into marsh, and the earth flowed like water, gradually engulfing him and trapping him in the swamp. Ugh! Alderman quickly chanted weight-reducing magic, coupled with levitation magic, and soon broke free from the swamp. Unfortunately, just as he escaped from the swamp, a sandstorm descended from above, pouring down like torrential rain, directly pouring into the pit, and washing him down. Now, Alderman's situation was extremely grave. Below was the swamp, where he would be engulfed once trapped. Above was the sandstorm, striking him relentlessly, making it impossible for him to fly. Whether swamp or sandstorm, both were physical existences, but ironically, Alderman's magic defense barrier was useless against such things. "No. I can't use this magic defense barrier anymore." Gritting his teeth, Alderman dispelled his magic defense barrier and quickly chanted physical defense barrier. When the physical defense barrier was formed, the sandstorm that had descended from the sky and rushed toward him was separated by the barrier. The swamp beneath him was also parted, finally allowing him to break free. Alderman hurriedly rushed out of the pit, pushing aside debris along the way, and finally returned to the surface. Whoa! In the audience seats, a burst of uproar immediately erupted. It was not without reason. Alderman, who had just emerged from the pit, was quite different from before. The previous Alderman was elegantly dressed, like a refined middle-aged gentleman, calm and handsome. But the current Alderman was covered in mud, swamp water, and gravel, looking utterly miserable compared to before. Damn it! Alderman felt humiliated and cursed inwardly. In this state, he had no idea that the audience was roaring not just because of his miserable appearance but also because a figure had already appeared by his side. Buzz! A purple vortex fluctuation formed on the figure's fingertip, tapping Alderman's back. Sensing the touch, Alderman's body froze. The entire training field fell silent once again. "You're easier to deal with than I imagined," Yuri remarked calmly, her words piercing her father's self-respect deeply. "When did you?" Alderman gritted his teeth, squeezing the words out of his throat with difficulty. Phew, obviously when you fell into the trap I set," Yuri said while laughing. "Don't look so surprised. I walked over slowly and waited for you here for quite some time, you know? I knew you would try to escape this trap by using a physical defense barrier, but that way, you wouldn't be able to defend against my magic attack, no. This was a checkmate. Admit it, you can't keep up with this era anymore. Whether it's your fighting style, your magic, or your thoughts and beliefs. They're all outdated." After saying those words, Yuri calmly turned and walked away. The second round's winner goes to Marquis Frenzel. Upon hearing the announcement, Alderman collapsed to the ground. His face was filled with shame. Chapter 126, Final Round. Victory. In a corner of the VIP seats, a small figure cheered. It was none other than Isaac. Not only Isaac but even Medist was present. The siblings huddled together in the corner of the VIP seats, unnoticed by anyone as they witnessed the entire process of their family members fighting each other. Initially, when Marilyn lost to Cephas, these two siblings were somewhat worried that Yuri might also lose. However, Yuri reassured them in the most direct way possible that there was no need to worry. Their elder sister effortlessly defeated their father. Instead of feeling upset, this filled the two siblings with joy. Indeed, elder sister Yuri is the strongest. Whether it's elder brother or father, none are elder sister Yuri's opponents. Isaac shouted with excitement. "She is what I want to become. I really want to become a great magician like her." Medist didn't say anything, but there was a longing and admiration in her eyes as she watched Yuri leave the center of the training field. For young Medist and Isaac, Yuri, who could directly defeat their fearsome father, was the most admirable figure. Now that their elder sister had won, the two siblings felt only joy, no sadness. Moreover, they knew what promise their father would have to fulfill once she won. It would be the best outcome if this could bring their mother and their eldest sister back home and reunite the family. The final round is up next. Medist muttered with a hint of anticipation in her eyes. "The one who's going to compete is that guy, right?" Isaac's expression soured. "He better not mess up." "He won't." Medist shook her head. "Mr. Riesel is a tactical class magician. He shouldn't lose to those attendants and knights under father's command." "Who knows?" Isaac lightly snorted. "He can't use tactical class magic in this war festival, so who knows if he can win." At his words, Medist's brows furrowed. Apart from her, many others present had guessed who would be competing next. Next up should be Riesel Brynhart, right? The young nobleman from the royal capital showed a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. "It should be him." The young nobleman's attendant replied. Although Marquis Frenzel still has two sword master attendants, the one she sends out as the main act must be that tactical class magician. Everyone believed that Yuri wouldn't consider Anne and Ian as the final acts. After all, this was the last round, the decisive battle of the war festival. In such an important moment, she wouldn't send out her two female attendants weaker than herself and her maid. For this reason, the one who would come out last must be the tactical class magician, Riesel Brynhart. Is it because his combat class magic proficiency is better than Yuri Frenzel's? Is that why he's placed last? If that's the case, then his value is even greater than we imagined. Let's keep watching. If he truly has the strength, we'll spare no effort to bring him back to our country. Many people with ulterior motives began to make such plans, preparing to take a good look at Riesel's strength. Including the young nobleman, he was no exception. Unaware of all this, Riesel, along with Marilyn, Anne, and Ian, greeted Yuri, who returned victorious. "Well played, my lady. I didn't expect my lady to be so skilled with combat class magic." Anne and Ian were both somewhat surprised, looking as if they hadn't expected Yuri to easily defeat Alderman. Marilyn, on the other hand, remained calm, evidently already aware of the outcome. Among those present, perhaps only this silent maid understood Yuri's combat strength best. As for Riesel, though he hadn't seen Yuri demonstrate her strength, he was confident in her nonetheless, and as expected, she emerged victorious. "Congratulations!" Riesel offered a brief congratulation. Yuri smiled gently at him but quickly suppressed it in the next second. Now it's your turn. Yuri stared straight at his face. Riesel didn't respond, only giving a calm smile. Everything was understood without words. It will be a showdown with that swordsman, right? His gaze began to fluctuate as he thought about the peculiar feeling the closed-eyed man had given him. Meanwhile, on Alderman's side. When Alderman returned with a messy appearance and complexion, everyone fell silent. My didn't expect to lose. Only see Faz, speaking casually as if it didn't concern him. That sister of mine, it's only been 2 years since she became a strategic class magician, but she already has this kind of power. Faz cast his gaze toward Yuri's direction, his eyes serious. His younger sister truly was a once-in-a-century super genius. Even if he went all out, he might not even be her match at all. Terrifying indeed. Faz murmured, his meaning unclear. Alderman paid his son no mind since he wasn't in the mood to deal with him now. He had lost so badly, really badly. Though it was frustrating for him, what he cared about more was the outcome of the final round. Jill Dardis. Alderman turned his gaze and called out the closed-eyed swordsman's name who had been by his side lately. The closed-eyed swordsman, Jill Dardis, didn't speak, only calmly raised his head. Although his eyes were closed, he seemed to be looking at Alderman. Do you feel confident about winning? Alderman asked solemnly. Only 3 people on my daughter's side haven't competed yet. It's unlikely she'll choose Anne and Ian, but rather Riesel Brynhart. Are you confident in defeating him? To be honest, Alderman himself was quite unsure. Mainly because Yuri decided to place Riesel in the final round, he couldn't shake the feeling that this young man might have more ability than he imagined. Undoubtedly someone who was not easy to deal with. On the other hand, he also had confidence in Jill, otherwise, he wouldn't have placed him in the final round. However, to say he knew much about Jill was hard to say since he had only met Jill not long ago. At that time, Jill was surrounded by a group of monsters. Monsters were creatures with magical energy similar to human swordsmen, honing bodies far superior to ordinary animals where some of them could even use supernatural powers like magicians. Originally, they were just ordinary animals, but due to their inborn stronger magical energy, they gradually evolved their bodies and abilities in the wilderness and, as they continued to breed, formed tribes in various corners of the world. The most talked about monster was the legendary Great Dragon, known as the King of Monsters, capable of spewing flames that could instantly destroy a city. 400 years ago, the Dragon Sword Saint relied on his research on dragons to create the Holy Dragon Sword style, becoming the strongest swordsman of the time. Although what Jill encountered in the wilderness was not dragons but a group of wolf-like creatures the size of elephants, among them was a wolf king whose strength might be able to match that of a sword master. However, despite being surrounded by such a group of monsters, they were unexpectedly slain in the blink of an eye by Jill who had been closing his eyes all along. As he witnessed that scene, Alderman was astonished on the spot and immediately extended an olive branch to Jill, intending to recruit him as his attendant. Unfortunately, Jill did not agree immediately. I'll just stick by your side for now. At that moment, Jill simply uttered such a sentence and began to follow him everywhere. Alderman assumed Jill was trying to see if he was worthy of being someone he could pledge loyalty to, so he gladly agreed, bringing Jill home and even keeping him by his side constantly to show his appreciation. It wasn't until today that Alderman finally let him take action, handling the last round of the war festival. For this reason, Alderman wasn't sure if Jill could defeat Riesel since he didn't know the true strength of this closed-eyed swordsman. However, instead of answering Alderman's question about whether he could defeat Riesel or not, Jill suddenly asked a strange question. Do you know what color his blood is? Upon hearing the unexpected and strange question, Alderman was confused. What? Just curious. Jill muttered indifferently as he walked away, lost in his own thoughts. What does he mean? Alderman furrowed his brow, puzzled. Only Faz, watching Jill's back, narrowed his eyes and pondered something unknown. The rounds of swordsmen and magicians have both ended. The war festival's announcer declared to the audience. Both sides have 1 win and 1 loss, and this final round will directly determine the ultimate winner between them. Now, please welcome the final participants. The announcer's voice elicited loud cheers from countless people in the audience seats. Since the war festival had reached its climax, they were excited and eagerly anticipating the upcoming round. Tap 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 tap. In this festive atmosphere, Riesel and Jill finally stepped onto the center of the training field. Standing a distance apart, they fell into an indescribable silence. The entire audience was also affected, gradually quieting down. Until 1 second later. Begin. With the announcer's loud proclamation, someone suddenly disappeared from the scene. It was none other than Jill. Whoosh! In an instant, Jill surged forward at an astonishing speed, closing the distance between him and Riesel to 0. Swish! In Jill's hand, a long and sharp sword, drawn seemingly out of nowhere, sliced through the air and aimed at Riesel's neck. This slash was as fast as lightning. This slash exuded a murderous intent. No one could react. No one could comprehend what had happened. The closed-eyes swordsman suddenly launched an attack, aiming directly for Riesel's vital point, making it a killing move. Yes. He intended to kill Riesel. However. Ding! Sparks scattered as Jill's slash, full of murderous intent, was easily flicked away. It was intercepted by a bright silver short sword that came out of nowhere, deflecting it upwards. Jill's complexion suddenly changed. However, before he could react, Riesel, with an icy coldness in his eyes, swiftly counterattacked. Puchi! The bright silver short sword slashed extremely fast across Jill's chest, causing blood to spurt out. In the next second, Jill collapsed in front of Riesel, covered in blood. Witnessing this scene, the entire training field instantly fell into silent stillness. Chapter 127, Swordsman and Magician. In the training field, silence hung heavy, like the breath of death. Every single soul present, be it commoners or nobles, even those with ulterior motives, found themselves plunged into a state of bewilderment and shock, unable to react at the moment. Yuri and the aldermen, representatives of their respective groups, stared wide-eyed at the scene unfolding in the center of the training field. They watched as Jill lay flat before Riesel, who held a bright silver short sword in his hand, his sudden action leaving everyone stunned. It took a moment before the audience erupted. What's going on? Did he kill the guy? Murder? Did he just break the rules? These were the immediate questions in everyone's mind. Only a few individuals, shaken from their stupor, rose to their feet. That man actually tried to kill Riesel. Yuri's voice carried a hint of anger. Marilyn, Anne, and Ian wore cold expressions, their gazes piercing across to the alderman's side. Yet on the alderman's side, apart from Cephas, who remained silent and uninterested, the rest wore expressions of confusion and disbelief. What happened? Alderman was at a loss. Something seems off here. After muttering that, the young nobleman who had been lounging among the honored guests suddenly stood up. Elder Sister Medist, what's going on? Isaac was completely flustered. I don't know either. Medist appeared equally puzzled. Eventually, the murmurs of the audience began to rise, confused by the sudden turn of events. However, at this moment, Riesel in the center of the training field moved once more. Boom! With an explosive sound, Riesel forcefully kicked out in front of him, sending a cloud of dust billowing into the air. His foot aimed straight for Jill's head as if intent on crushing it like a melon. Unfortunately, the blow never landed. Just as Riesel's merciless kick was about to connect, Jill, still lying on the ground, suddenly sprang to life with no warning. Like a wild beast on all fours, he swiftly darted backward with incredible agility and speed, narrowly evading Riesel's attack. He's alive! That guy is alive! Seeing this, the audience erupted into gasps. Jill, bathed in the exclamations of others, was on all fours on the ground, his head hanging down, unable to discern his expression. In this state, surprisingly, the bleeding from his chest had already stopped, and the wound wasn't as deep as everyone imagined. However, as everyone looked at Jill like this, for some reason, a chill crept into their hearts. That swordsman is indeed as Riesel described, something's off. At this moment, even Yuri, usually slow to catch on, sensed that something was amiss. Not just her, but everyone else too, sensed something peculiar about Jill from this moment onwards. A chilling sensation rose in the hearts of many, causing their gazes upon Jill, on all fours with blood seeping from his chest, to gradually resemble those of someone observing an injured wild beast. Only Riesel, with an indifferent expression, looked at Jill calmly. "Aren't you going to stop playing dead?" Riesel's somewhat mocking remark didn't elicit a response from Jill. He remained on all fours, with his head bowed, only raising one hand to touch his chest. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Jill's voice, faint as if in a trance, intensified the eerie feeling in everyone's hearts. He began to stare at his hand, staring at the blood on it for a while before suddenly laughing like a maniac. So, my blood is red too, hey. Red, vibrant, and warm. He he he. Ha 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 ha. Over time, the laughter from the blood-stained swordsman grew louder, eerie, and chilling until, after a while, his voice abruptly stopped. He forcefully lifted his head, his tightly closed eyes suddenly opening. Surprisingly, the whites of his eyes were entirely crimson, like the eyes of a demon. It hurts. You bastard! Jill roared, his figure flashing, bursting forth. Whoosh! His speed was even faster than the attack on Riesel at the beginning of the scene, several times faster. Ding! Jill's sword cleaved down, carrying with it ear-piercing sonic bursts, forcefully striking against Riesel's bright silver short sword, causing a resounding clang like a struck bell. Riesel raised his short sword, blocking Jill's swift strike head-on, his gaze still as cold as before. Ha 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 ha! Jill laughed out loud, his single-edged sword in hand turning into countless afterimages, attacking Riesel with astonishing speed. Clang, cling, clang, cling. The intense metal collision sound rang out instantly. Riesel's sword clashed extremely fast with Jill's sword, causing the collision sound to continue without stopping. Their figures disappeared on the spot, turning into two ghostly afterimages, entangling with each other, darting around the field, engaging in intense combat. Clang, cling, clang, cling. In an instant, sparks flew, strong winds swept through, and dust and sand seemed to be stirred up like flying debris, turning the entire training field into what resembled a battlefield, as if thousands of troops were charging, swirling up clouds of dust and smoke. Some people were left stupefied by the scene. Some were thrown into chaos by it. Whether the audience or directly involved participants in the war festival, as they watched Riesel and Jill's intense battle, not a single one didn't wear a bewildered expression. He. Even the young nobleman from the royal capital, upon witnessing Riesel engaging in fierce combat with Jill, was left with a blank expression. Isn't he supposed to be a magician? This was the first thought of many who knew Riesel's identity. What did they see? They saw the tactical class magician they were paying attention to now engaging in intense close combat as a swordsman. The intensity of this close combat and the power it carried, was even more terrifying than the earlier fierce battle between Marilyn and Cephas, two expert sword masters. Riesel Brynhart, was this young man actually not a tactical class magician but a sword master? Was the intelligence mistaken? However, this thought was immediately proven wrong in the next moment. Unleashed streak of light, bow limbs of the holy tree. You are an expert of the bow. Shoot, sniper of the fairies. Penetrate, arrow of absolute accuracy. A cold chanting emerged between the two fighters, causing a thick concentration of magical energy to gather in Riesel's hand. Arc's ray. With a flick of his sword, Riesel unleashed a light arrow from his hand in an extremely fast swoop, turning the unforeseeable light arrow into artillery fire, blasting toward Jill without mercy. Jill reacted swiftly, his figure bounding like a wild beast, darting back and forth on the ground, jumping extremely fast to evade the incoming barrage. However, the light arrow transformed into a beam of light and continued to chase after him relentlessly. No matter how he jumped or changed direction, it pursued him steadfastly, tearing through space, leaving behind long trails of light. Before long, Jill was caught up by the beam of light. Boom! An astounding explosion occurred in the split second when the beam of light hit Jill. Flames erupted, engulfing Jill's body, raging in the training field, illuminating not only the entire field but also the stunned faces of the audience. Everyone was either shocked, bewildered, or trembling as they gazed at Riesel. Especially Cephas, Alderman, Isaac, Medist, and some unknown guests. Finally grasping an unbelievable fact, they all stood up in tandem. What the heck? He's actually both a swordsman and a magician. A sword master and a tactical class magician? You can't be serious. Man, this is bullshit. Holy shit! Countless exclamations broke the silence of the audience seats. A sword master and a tactical class magician. On the VIP seats, the attendant of the young nobleman wore a look of disbelief. This can't be true, right? The young nobleman trembled, murmuring incessantly. Am I seeing this right? He's not just a tactical class magician but also a sword master. Meanwhile, Isaac, who watched also had his eyes widened in disbelief. Not just him, even Medist's pair of beautiful eyes were wide open. What a surprise, I thought she was holding a ghost card, turns out it's a deadly knife hidden up her sleeve. Faz cast his gaze toward Yuri across the training field. In contrast, Alderman was utterly stupefied. The successive occurrences had surpassed the ability of this old-fashioned former head of the Frenzel family to handle, leaving him unable to react at all for the moment. In the entire training field, only Yuri's group remained indifferent to the situation. In fact, she even gave instructions to Marilyn and the others. Clear the audience. Quickly. She had a feeling that whatever happened next would be dangerous enough to threaten the audience. Driven by this intuition, she decided to evacuate the audience while already beginning to chant her magic, ready to act at any moment. Meanwhile, the two in the center of the training field had again entered intense combat. Ha 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 ha! Jill burst out from the exploding flames, his skin burnt and blistered all over, yet he laughed cheerfully, his eyes glowing red as he charged toward Riesel again. I must have your blood. Give me your blood. Give me your blood. Jill raved and roared, his sword slashing like a storm, while waves of blood like crimson magical energy emanated from his body. Empowered by this crimson magical energy, Jill's attacks seemed even stronger, each strike forcing Riesel to retreat. As Riesel defended against Jill's attack, his expression inevitably grew increasingly serious. Meanwhile, as Yuri witnessed this scene, she momentarily paused her chanting of magic. As she gazed at Jill's figure bathed in crimson magical energy, she soon remembered something and then muttered a name. Demon Sword Style. Chapter 128, Demon Sword Style. Yuri's discovery was actually noticed by others as well. When Jill's body began to emanate a layer of crimson magical energy, growing stronger under its enchantment, many people noticed the problem with this swordsman. So that man is a demon swordsman who practices demon sword style, hey! The young nobleman from the royal capital exclaimed, his expression suddenly enlightened. Demon sword style. The young nobleman's attendant, upon hearing his master's words, immediately showed a shocked expression. Isn't that the swordsmanship that caused chaos 3 years ago? Yeah, that one. The young nobleman nodded. This was something widely known even by ordinary people. Just 3 years ago, a group of very peculiar swordsmen suddenly appeared in various countries across the continent. They were powerful swordsmen. Not only were they powerful swordsmen on the level of sword masters, but without exception, each of them had eyes that glowed crimson. What they wielded was not a typical sword, but a curved blade sword resembling a saber with a single cutting edge. In battle, they would unleash crimson magical energy that enhanced their strength, making them virtually unbeatable opponents. Such an extremely powerful and eerie group of swordsmen naturally quickly attracted the attention of many countries, prompting them to send people one after another to make contact with this group of swordsmen, intending to uncover the secret behind their peculiar strength. At some point, this secret eventually spread. It turned out that these swordsmen were so peculiar and powerful because they all practiced a very unique swordsmanship. Typically, in swordsmanship, whether elementary, advanced, or special, practitioners stimulate the magical energy within their gates through breathing, absorbing magical energy to hone their bodies and become stronger. But this particular swordsmanship was different. When practicing this swordsmanship, swordsmen didn't strengthen themselves by absorbing magical energy within their gates, but rather by absorbing the blood of those who died by their swords to hone their bodies. In other words, swordsmen who practiced this swordsmanship didn't rely on practice to improve themselves, but rather on slaughter. The more people they killed, the stronger they became. The stronger the people they killed, the stronger they became. This was the swordsmanship that once caused a great uproar on the Akasha continent demon sword style. This swordsmanship was suitable for anyone to practice, as long as they were willing to kill and willing to feed on blood, they had no trouble becoming stronger. With such unique swordsmanship, this group of swordsmen caused trouble everywhere, resulting in countless killings, but each one became stronger than the next, none weaker than sword masters. The swordsman who fights Riesel Brynhart right now matches almost perfectly with the characteristics of those swordsmen mentioned in the rumors. He wields a curved blade sword with one cutting edge, has crimson eyes, and unleashes crimson magical energy during battle, continuously growing stronger. It can be confirmed that he is indeed a demon swordsman who practices demon sword style. As the young nobleman spoke with confidence, his attendant was still filled with uncertainty. But didn't they say this group of swordsmen had already been wiped out? Even the swordsmanship book of demon sword style had been destroyed, right? Yes, both demon swordsman and demon sword style were no longer in existence. Needless to say, these swordsmen were just too crazy, too fond of slaughter, causing numerous disasters. Because of this, one after another, many countries dispatched their knights to hunt down these swordsmen and eventually succeeded in completely eradicating them. As a result, demon sword style also fell into the hands of these countries. However, they all unanimously decided to destroy this swordsmanship since it was too dangerous, and its side effects were too dreadful. No choice. In order to get stronger, those who practiced demon sword style would engage in countless killings throughout their lives. Of course, if it were just that, it wouldn't have reached the point of being destroyed. The problem lay in the fact that after practicing this swordsmanship, practitioners would increasingly crave blood, becoming more and more frenzied, to the point where they could substitute blood for 3 meals a day. Practicing this swordsmanship could make people addicted and attracted to blood, especially the blood of the strong, which could attract them even more. With such side effects, it was natural that any sane person would steer clear of it. Many countries also feared that someone would disregard everything to pursue power by practicing this swordsmanship, each becoming a demon swordsman disrupting the peace of the nation. For this reason, they decided to destroy it. In this way, theoretically, both demon sword style and demon swordsmen who practiced it should no longer exist. However, do you really believe it just because others say it's been destroyed? Upon hearing the young nobleman's question, the attendant was speechless. Indeed, just because others said it had been destroyed, was that really the case? This peculiar and unique swordsmanship, which could turn anyone as strong as sword masters, and even stronger without hindrance, even with its side effects, how many would willingly destroy it? Not to mention, the ones who made such statements were the leaders of various countries on the Akasha continent. Who knew if they said one thing publicly but did another behind closed doors? This kind of swordsmanship, which allowed one to get stronger by just killing, would definitely be coveted by ambitious individuals, while some would want to use it to develop a powerful army of killers to destroy their enemies. Given this, the statements of the so-called destruction of demon sword style by various countries should be taken with a grain of salt. Moreover, nobody knows if any of these demon swordsmen, who were said to be annihilated, managed to escape and survive. After saying that, the young nobleman shook his head and narrowed his eyes as he looked at Jill, who was gradually losing his sanity in the training field. At this moment, Jill was indeed nearing madness. "Give me your blood! Give me your blood! Give me your blood!" As the crimson hue in Jill's eyes was illuminated by the crimson magical energy, it was almost indistinguishable from that of a demon's eyes. There was no trace of rationality inside, only an infinite craving for blood and the peak enjoyment of slaughter. Ding! When a metal collision sound rang out louder and stronger than any previous collision, Riesel, who had been continuously defending against Jill's fierce attacks, was finally knocked back. His feet scraped against the ground, his body unable to stop its backward momentum, plowing a deep trench on the ground, sending gravel and debris flying everywhere. Ha 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 ha! Jill laughed loudly, excited like a fierce demon emerging from hell, not giving Riesel any time to catch his breath, darting toward him like an arrow released from its bow. Seeing this, Riesel knew he had to get serious. "Follow blindly the sun in the sky, so that all will flee from thee. Blossom, armor of laurel. Remure." As the protection magic that highly reinforced and AGI was chanted, Riesel's body was enveloped in a deep green membrane. Tempest. With the addition of Ariel, Riesel once again used this overpowered magic, revealing its prowess for the first time in a world other than Danmachi. Whoosh! The air in the training field began to surge, turning into streams of air currents that entwined around Riesel's body. With howling whines, the deep green light coated the air, turning the originally invisible and colorless wind into a deep green hue. Riesel, wrapped in deep green whines, met Jill, whose body was permeated with crimson magical energy. Boom! Amid the astonishing collision, a shock wave exploded outwards, blowing away sand and breaking the ground, sending countless stones and debris flying. What? Fuck! Stones? Stones are flying toward us! In the audience seats, people watched as stones and debris mixed in with the shock wave flew toward them, plunging them into panic. Fortunately, these stones and the shock wave were all blocked by the suddenly appearing transparent barrier. It was none other than the barrier of the training field. After not being used since the first 2 rounds, it finally proved its worth in this 3rd round. Upon seeing the barrier, the audience breathed a sigh of relief and finally calmed down. However, this caused them to become completely absorbed in the battle taking place on the training field. Clang, cling, clang, cling. In the ruined training field, two swordsmen wrapped in the deep green wind and crimson magical energy were slashing at each other at astonishing speed, causing the sword lights to constantly flicker, collide, disappear, and fly in all directions. Riesel's hermit had already become a blurry silhouette in his hand, accompanied by his movements that turned into endless sword lights slashing toward Jill's whole body with a speed as swift as the wind. Jill, on the other hand, slashed out crimson sword lights, aiming straight for Riesel's neck, heart, head, and even his eyes. Despite not having as many sword lights as Riesel, he targeted vital points with deadly precision. Without a doubt, this ignited anger within Riesel. Although his gaze and expression remained calm, Riesel no longer attempted to defend himself against Jill's slashes. As he allowed these slashes to land on his body, he cut through Jill's countless sword lights with Hermit, violently aiming toward Jill's body. Seeing this, the crimson hue in Jill's eyes deepened, seemingly provoked by Riesel's reckless behavior. Ignoring Riesel's slashes, he broke the sound barrier with his sword and aimed it at Riesel's head. This mutual suicidal action, however, did not result in mutual destruction. Ding! Jill's sword, arriving later, fiercely struck Riesel's forehead, but was flicked away by the wind enveloping his body, causing nothing but a burst of sparks, inflicting no damage. What? Jill exclaimed in shock, his crimson eyes widening in an instant. However, before he could react further, Riesel's attack had already landed on his body. Pu-chi, pu-chi, pu-chi. The sound of flesh tearing apart echoed, causing blood to splatter. Riesel's slashes landed respectively on Jill's cheek, side, thigh, shoulder, and positions of major arteries, mercilessly cutting open these areas. Jill, with wounds appearing all over his body as if struck by lightning, trembled violently and was sent flying backward. Arc's Ray. Riesel quickly recited a short chant, unleashing a more powerful Arc's Ray, shooting a light arrow the size of his body at Jill. Boom! In the next second, an explosion shook the entire training field, causing exploding flames to sweep over the audience seats along with the shock wave. As this happened, the transparent barrier protecting the audience immediately trembled. Chapter 129, I'll crush you into a bloody pulp right now. Did he win? Watching as Jill vanished without a trace into the exploding flame, courtesy of Riesel's magic, the audience couldn't help but wonder. Upon learning that Riesel was a tactical class magician and an expert swordsman on the level of sword master, many people began to lean toward him, hoping he would emerge victorious in this war festival. Not only did they not know Jill, but many hadn't even realized he was once a notorious demon swordsman 3 years ago. They simply judged him as someone not to root for based on his peculiar behavior. On the other hand, Riesel, young and handsome, proficient in both swordsmanship and magic, was highly respected. His prowess far surpassed that of an ordinary character, leading many to favor him and hope for his victory. It could be said that Riesel's popularity among the audience at this moment was almost on par with Yuri's. As a result, the audience couldn't help but anticipate the final outcome. Even the young nobleman from the royal capital, unknown guests from a foreign country, and the Frenzel siblings were all eagerly anticipating and feeling nervous about it. He should have won, right, elder sister Medist? Even Isaac, unknowingly setting aside any grievances he might have had with Riesel, stared at the training field, his voice tinged with nervousness. I don't know. Medist shook her head, her eyes also betraying nervousness. She hoped Riesel would win. Not only because he represented her elder sister's side, but also because this man might very well be her future husband. Initially, she had been pessimistic about her father's arrangement to marry her off to him. However, after witnessing his performance today, she suddenly felt that maybe it wasn't so bad. In any case, she definitely wished for his victory. Meanwhile, Yuri hoped desperately that Riesel would finish off Jill once and for all, potentially averting any further unexpected events. She had already dispatched Anne and Ian to scatter the audience, but unfortunately, their efforts yielded little result. All the audience was too absorbed in the battle between Riesel and Jill, and with the barrier protection in place, many didn't think there was any danger and were reluctant to leave. This made her feel increasingly anxious, sensing that trouble was brewing. Because of this, she earnestly hoped Riesel could deal with Jill directly, even if it meant violating rules or resorting to lethal measures. However, dealing with a powerful swordsman like Jill, whom Riesel had evaluated as a level 6 expert adventurer, wouldn't be that easy. Suddenly, Jill's furious howl echoed throughout the training field, causing the exploding flame to tremble. Boom! Before long, the exploding flame burst open. Covered in burns, with charred skin, Jill relied on the crimson magical energy enhancement to unleash a powerful swing of his sword, creating a surging airflow that dispersed the exploding flame. Ha 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 ha! Ha 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 ha! Jill gasped for breath violently, yet still laughing as he did so. Very strong, it hurts, very strong, it hurts, very strong, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. It fucking hurts. Damn bastard. As his laughter subsided, Jill suddenly turned his face, yelling hysterically at Riesel. His frenzied appearance was indeed frightening, causing several audiences to involuntarily step back and tremble. However, Riesel, despite looking somewhat battered himself, calmly observed Jill, who seemed to have sustained no serious injuries, with a slight furrow of his brow. What a tough bastard! Riesel muttered. Jill was indeed tough. Having been hit by Arc's ray twice, and having been slashed multiple times, he still looked lively, almost inhuman. It was worth noting that Riesel was already at level 5, with a remarkable accumulation of latent basic abilities unmatched by anyone else. With the assistance of his mage development ability, the power of his Arc's ray had surpassed even the original owner of the magic, Luffy Ya. Luffy Ya was known for her level 5 attack power as a mage, so Riesel's attack power, theoretically speaking, was not inferior even compared to Riveria, the strongest mage in Orario. Such a degree of attack power, let alone against a level 6 opponent, would be strong enough even against a level 7. If it didn't hit, that was another matter, but once it did, Riesel doubted that a level 7 could withstand his magic unscathed. And yet, Jill endured 2 hits like nothing. Although not entirely unscathed, he was far from being incapacitated. For this reason, describing him as tough was entirely fitting. However, Riesel could sense that Jill hadn't fallen yet, not because of his strong defense, but because of his remarkably robust vitality. In gaming terms, his maximum health point was so high, even with 2 perfect hits from Arc's ray, it wasn't enough to push him to the brink of defeat because of his abundant health points. Moreover, despite Jill's eccentric and peculiar behavior, akin to that of a berserker, his combat intuitions were undeniably sharp. With its tracking capability, Arc's ray hitting him was unavoidable, no matter how hard he dodged. Yet, this man managed to evade almost all of Riesel's fast slashes, aiming away from vital points. The first time they clashed, when Riesel swung his sword toward Jill's chest, he suddenly sensed danger and instinctively paused his charge in a split second, resulting in only a superficial cut. During the recent clash, Riesel abandoned defense and went on the full offensive, slashing at Jill repeatedly, but most of the vital points were still evaded due to his keen intuition. In the end, Riesel only managed to hit non-vital points such as Jill's cheek, thigh, and side, with the only threat being a near miss of the major artery. Jill's crimson magical energy was also peculiar, not only making his body stronger as the fight dragged on but also seeming to have a strange effect on manipulating the flow of blood within other people's bodies. If not for Riesel's self-redemption, granting complete immunity to physical and mental interference, he might have been affected by this effect. At best, he would feel uncomfortable, and at worst, it could lead to ruptures inside his body, allowing Jill to absorb his blood. What's the deal with this guy? Riesel, who did not know about the events 3 years ago, was completely clueless about the existence of demon sword style and demon swordsman. The original Riesel had been farming in the countryside until the age of 15 when he ran away and, by a stroke of luck, took part in the entrance exam for Spriller Academy, and entered this prestigious school. At the age of 14, which was 3 years ago, his understanding of the outside world was limited, so he was completely ignorant of demon sword style and demon swordsman. This resulted in Riesel having no clue about Jill's origin, only finding him mysterious and dangerous. However, this didn't stop Riesel from dealing with Jill, as he wasn't one to turn the other cheek. Since Jill wanted to kill him, he wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. However, just as Riesel was thinking this, the next thing Jill would do was something that would thoroughly enrage him. Whoosh! Enveloped in crimson magical energy, Jill suddenly turned around and transformed into a human-shaped projectile, dashing toward a certain direction. Standing in that direction was none other than Yuri. My lady! Marilyn snapped into action, her usually calm and expressionless face showing alarm for the first time as she drew her dual swords, prepared to protect Yuri. Yuri, who had been watching Jill all along, had her expression changed abruptly when she saw him rushing toward her at incredible speed. Both of them tried to react, but their response speed couldn't match Jill's speed at all. He was like a wounded wild beast, displaying a speed even faster than before. "Let me patch myself up first," Jill yelled, his sword slicing through the air, aiming for Yuri's throat. He was in pain now, his whole body ached, and he understood that he wasn't Riesel's opponent. If things continued like this, he would definitely lose to Riesel. If he couldn't kill Riesel, he couldn't drink his blood. He wanted Riesel's blood, the blood of an expert, the blood of the strong. For this reason, he must find someone to drink their blood, become stronger, and then challenge Riesel again. With this thought in mind, Jill didn't hesitate much, charging straight at Yuri, who happened to enter his field of vision. Unfortunately, this turned out to be the biggest mistake Jill Dardis would make in his life. Tempest. When such a voice echoed through the training field, reaching everyone's ears, a hurricane arrived. Whoosh! As the frenzied wind howled across the entire training field, transforming Riesel into a gust of raging wind, he swiftly darted across half of the training field as the wind swept through. Piuchi! Jill's sword descended, leaving behind a splash of crimson blood, splattering into the sky. However, his slash didn't hit Yuri's throat but landed on a hand that suddenly appeared in front of her. Bang! At the same time, a kick, accompanied by the raging wind, struck heavily against Jill's chest, sending him flying. Cough! Jill spewed forth a mouthful of blood before flying backward and crashing into the wall surrounding the audience seats, shattering it. Riesel! Yuri's expression changed instantly as she emitted a startled cry. Riesel, surrounded by raging wind, suddenly appeared before Yuri, blocking Jill's recent slash with his own hand. Drip drip! Despite the pain from the wound on his hand, with blood dripping from it, Riesel disregarded it and merely raised his gaze, fixating on Jill crawling out from the rubble, his eyes exuding unprecedented rage. Blood! Blood! Jill struggled to rise while yelling wildly. Upon hearing his yell, Riesel had only one response. You want blood that much? No problem. I'll crush you into a bloody pulp right now. Chapter 130, ended. Struggling to rise from the pile of rubble, Jill's consciousness hadn't fully awakened yet. He only felt the pain coursing through his body, instinctively craving blood. As he raised his body, suddenly, he was locked onto by a terrifyingly intense murderous intent. The thick and suffocating murderous intent sent shivers down his spine, starting from the solace of his feet and rushing all the way to his crown, abruptly jolting him awake from his trance-like state. Upon this awakening, Jill immediately saw Riesel, enveloped in raging wind, his robes billowing and fluttering noisily in the gusts of wind. The ferociousness of Riesel's gaze and the constant flurry of lethal attacks he endured till now finally stirred a sense of fear in him. Despite being influenced by his swordsmanship and becoming addicted to blood, Jill had not completely lost his senses. 3 years ago, when all demon swordsmen were besieged by the knights dispatched by various countries, teetering on the brink of life and death, while others seemed to go mad and charge out excitedly to clash with the knights, Jill, subconsciously sensing danger, overcame his desire for blood, and chose to flee in fear. Because of this, Jill barely survived that massacre, living in the wilderness ever since, adhering to the principle of self-control. He sustained himself on animal blood, battling monsters, gradually satiating his thirst for blood, and slowly getting stronger. It wasn't until Jill encountered aldermen in the wilderness that he couldn't resist the craving for human blood anymore and decided to indulge. However, he didn't act immediately by killing aldermen on the spot for his blood. Since he had decided to indulge, he naturally wanted to make the most of this opportunity. Therefore, feigning interest in following aldermen, Jill actually intended to infiltrate the human-inhabited city to hunt humans. In the week leading up to the war festival, he often went out at night, seemingly strolling around the city, but in reality, he was secretly hunting humans, reveling in the blood of thugs or thieves lurking in the darkness. When the war festival began and the training field was crowded with people, he would unleash his slaughter there, satisfying himself to the fullest, then escape undine and retreat into the mountains, evading pursuit by the kingdom's knights. His first targets were obviously the experts who participated in the war festival. Like Riesel Brynhart, a tactical class magician. Like Yuri Frenzel, a strategic class magician. Step by step, by eliminating these experts first, he could eradicate potential threats and strengthen himself with their blood. Following that, he would hunt down the weaker ones, steadily progressing, feasting on their blood, rapidly boosting his own strength, perhaps even ascending to the status of Sword Saint, becoming a demon Sword Saint. For this reason, Jill had restrained himself until now. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on his side. With his strength, originally speaking, whether facing Yuri, Marilyn, Anne, Ian, or others, he could have found a way to catch them off guard and kill them with a single strike, letting their blood spill on the spot. However, his opponent happened to be the only one with strength comparable to level 6, an anomaly excelling in both swordsmanship and magic, Riesel Brynhart. After being injured by Riesel and instinctively stimulated by his great strength, Jill could no longer suppress his craving for the blood of the strong, descending into a semi-trance-like state of madness. However, now, faced with Riesel's undisguised murderous and terrifying aura, his rationality instantly returned, and the feeling of fear surged back into his heart. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Bang! Just as Jill's heart began to tremble, the ground beneath Riesel erupted, and he suddenly vanished on the spot, disappearing without a trace. Jill's heart skipped a beat, but still, relying on his sensitivity to blood, he sensed Riesel's trail. Here! Without hesitation, Jill swung his sword to the right, letting out a whistling sound of crimson magical energy, disrupting the atmosphere, and aiming at the sudden figure that appeared there. However, Riesel disregarded this swing entirely, rushing forward at once and lunging straight at Jill. Ding! Jill's forceful swing landed on the whirlwind surrounding Riesel's body. Just like before, it was easily flicked aside. Puchi! At this moment, Riesel's slash finally surged from his hand, its speed surprisingly quick, as if it traversed space and time, slicing across Jill's shoulder, causing his flesh to tear and blood to splatter. Too fast! Jill's pupils contracted sharply. Riesel's slash just now was completely beyond Jill's response, much faster than before. No, it wasn't just his attack speed, even his movement speed had increased significantly. Puchi, 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 Puchi. Accompanied by the sound of tearing, Riesel's figure seemed to truly transform into an invisible and colorless wind, flickering and darting around Jill's body, unleashing slashes that struck various parts of his body, leaving him covered in wounds and bleeding heavily. As Jill roared furiously, he continuously swung his sword imbued with crimson magical energy, creating booming sounds and whistling through the air. Pitifully, despite his efforts, he couldn't land a single hit on Riesel's body, who effortlessly dodged with astonishing speed. Jill's missed slashes only struck nothing, sending streaks of crimson sword light flying, leaving cracks in the ground and walls. Boom, 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 boom. The rubble and dust flew up once again, turning the entire training field into chaos, combined with the howling wind, giving a sense of devastation. It was only then that Jill suddenly noticed the change in Riesel's weapon. The weapon held in his hand was no longer a bright silver short sword but a somewhat dark silver long sword. Thin as a cicada's wing, the sword edge was nearly transparent, with a beautiful and noble appearance that did not look at all like a metal product but rather like a crystal so translucent. Yet, this sword, which seemed more like a work of art than a weapon, exhibited astonishing sharpness and power in Riesel's hands. Puchi, 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 Puchi. With Fool in hand, Riesel pushed lightweight to its limit, increased by the enhancements of Ariel and Remuer. His speed had reached a level where even Jill, someone comparable to a level 6 expert, couldn't react at all. Even before returning to this main world, Riesel's strength had surpassed that of Ace, who was evaluated as capable of challenging opponents at a higher level. Such was Riesel's prowess that, if he went all out, even someone like Finn, Riveria, and Gareth at the pinnacle of level 6 would find him a difficult opponent. Although he had only recently leveled up to level 5, the accumulation of SSS basic abilities on every level and the acquisition of various combat-type development abilities allowed him to surpass Ace, a top-ranked level 5, even without using magic. Now, with the addition of Remuer and Ariel, even facing Jill was no longer challenging for Riesel. As Riesel's sword light sped forth with astonishing speed, Jill found himself subjected to a relentless attack, his body seeming to burst open, blood and wounds blossoming continuously, leaving him battered and miserable. Facing dire situations, Jill finally erupted, his crimson magical energy turning deeper crimson, enhancing his strength further, finally matching Riesel's speed and allowing him to react. However, Riesel disregarded Jill's counterattacks entirely, allowing Jill's crimson slashes to rain down on his body without blocking or dodging. With the boosted end from Remuer and the wind protection from Ariel, even Jill's powerful slashes were ultimately deflected one by one, leaving only a few shallow wounds on Riesel's body that oozed a little blood, doing little else. On the other hand, Riesel's slashes became faster and fiercer, not only splitting Jill's skin but nearly stripping his flesh from head to toe, leaving several deep wounds on his shoulders and thighs where bone could even be seen. Despite this, Riesel showed no signs of relenting, seemingly intent on crushing Jill into a bloody pulp, his speed and ferocity undiminished, slashing relentlessly, again and again. His merciless executioner-like performance caused many in the audience to show expressions of horror, with some even closing their eyes in fear. Finally, Jill broke down. "Get out of my sight!" Boom! Jill roared and swung his sword toward the ground, shattering it and creating a violent shockwave and billowing dust. In response to this furious attack, Riesel seemed rather indifferent. As the dust settled, Riesel calmly lifted his hand as a fluctuation of crimson vortex appeared above it. Riesel's trump card, hidden until now, finally made its debut. With a thunderous force akin to a storm, the crimson vortex tore through the earth and sky, closing in on Jill as he attempted to flee. Unfortunately, before Jill could react, it was too late. Bzzzztt. The crimson vortex struck Jill, engulfing his body completely. "No, no, no!" Jill let out a despairing cry before his body disintegrated within the crimson vortex, like a dungeon monster deprived of its core, turning to ashes and vanishing without a trace. A cruel and brutal battle finally ended. Riesel dispelled the wind and emerald green membrane around his body. "It seems you didn't even deserve to become a bloody pulp," Riesel muttered, watching with cold eyes the spot where Jill's body vanished to nothingness. With this outcome, the war festival finally came to a close, with Riesel as the ultimate victor. Chapter 131, After the War Festival. The war festival finally came to an end. Naturally, the entire process and details of this war festival spread widely afterward. Cephas emerged victorious over Marilyn, telling the world that this Frenzel family's eldest son was still a prodigy. Since becoming a sword master 5 years ago, his strength had not stagnated but made significant progress instead. He was now considered a powerful sword master with the potential to become a sword saint. Yuri, on the other hand, defeated Alderman, showcasing not only her prowess as a strategic class magician but also her adept use of combat class magic. She had surpassed her father and was now capable of holding her own in battles. Of course, the most talked about event was the third round between Riesel and Jill, which was full of unexpected twists and turns. Technically, Riesel should have been considered the loser in this war festival since he killed Jill, which was expressly prohibited by Alderman before the war festival began. Riesel knowingly violated this rule, which should have led to his disqualification or even his judgment being sought by the Frenzel family. However, Jill was a demon swordsman, a dangerous swordsman proficient in demon sword style. Not only did he attempt to kill Riesel at the beginning of the battle, but he also targeted Yuri, who was not only the head of the Frenzel family but also a strategic class magician and a marquis of the kingdom. Therefore, if anyone had violated the rules first, it was Jill. Murder attempts against Riesel could be overlooked since Jill hadn't succeeded and had almost been killed by Riesel in retaliation. Furthermore, in a fighting competition, Jill's actions could be seen as a miscalculation or accident in the heat of the moment, a perspective shared by most of the audience. Apart from Yuri, who sensed trouble early and dispatched people to disperse the audience, everyone else thought like that, allowing the war festival to continue uninterrupted. However, Jill's attack on Yuri was undoubtedly a clear violation of the rules, leaving no room for discussion. Because of this, Riesel could be considered the winner from that moment onward. His immediate action of killing Jill on the spot was merely seen as a way to protect Yuri. Hence, the ultimate victor of the war festival was Yuri's group. As for Jill's status as a swordsman who practiced demon sword style, it didn't cause much of a stir. People were more interested in Riesel, who managed to excel in both swordsmanship and magic, achieving significant feats in both. He was not only a powerful sword master but also a tactical class magician. I never imagined there could be someone in this world who excels in both swordsmanship and magic. Same here. You know, swordsmen typically stick to swordsmanship because their magical energy isn't enough to become magicians. But someone with ample magical energy to be a magician chooses to dive into swordsmanship as well? That's wild, you know. And yet, Sir Riesel not only pursued both but also excelled in them. What a legend! Having him join the Frenzel family is great. People continued to discuss these matters enthusiastically, indicating that this topic would be one of the hottest this time. Even those with ulterior motives couldn't help but join in the excitement. Let's head back and report on Riesel Brynhart first. Afterward, we'll find a way to contact him. Yeah, we need to find a way to bring him to our country. A sword master and a tactical class magician, hey. TCH, makes you wonder how he pulled that off. Such a skilled magician, yet still focusing on swordsmanship. First time seeing someone like him. Alright, let's stop chatting. Time to head back and deliver the news. I'm sure the higher UPS will want to hear about this. And so, some were biding their time, others were finding ways to contact their superiors, while some were keeping a close eye on Riesel, attempting something. Among them was the young nobleman from the royal capital. Send an invitation to the Frenzel family. The young nobleman ordered his attendant. I must meet this incredible guy. Yes. The attendant responded immediately. It could be said that Undine was both lively and filled with hidden movements. Countless people were watching the Frenzel family, watching Riesel, unsure of what action would be taken. As for Riesel himself, he also sensed the changes happening around him. On this day, the weather was clear. Even though the war festival was already yesterday's news, the discussions it sparked remained lively. While Undine was still bustling, the Frenzel family had returned to a brief calm. Riesel walked through the corridors, encountering many servants, guards, and knights along the way. Sir Riesel! Sir Riesel! Lord Brynhart! Like this, whether they were servants, guards, or knights, they all stopped in their tracks and respectfully bowed to Riesel as soon as they saw him. Their attitude and level of respect had undoubtedly become much more intense and sincere compared to a week ago when they treated Riesel as a guest. Some even went as far as to regard him as a noble, addressing him directly as Lord Brynhart. Hello. Riesel nodded in acknowledgement to them, returning the gesture, but inwardly, he felt somewhat displeased. After all, he didn't like being treated as someone important, respected, or even feared excessively by others. Such situations were something he had had enough of in his previous life, and he certainly didn't want to see them again in this world. Unfortunately, there was no way around it. The social class consciousness in this world was deeply ingrained. Given Riesel's demonstrated strength, the servants would undoubtedly worry about being disrespectful to him and whether they would face consequences if they didn't act properly. Even though Riesel was not a noble and was currently just a commoner, as a tactical class magician, becoming a noble was just a matter of time. Any commoners in the Frenzel family who understood this point already regarded him as a noble. Coupled with his intimidating strength, they wouldn't dare to show any disrespect. Ha! I miss Loki Familia. Riesel couldn't help but think of Twilight Manor. In there, although he gradually earned the respect of Familia members with his growing strength and was no longer treated as a rookie, they never placed themselves beneath him. They simply respected, admired, and supported him as the backbone of the Familia, akin to a family member. He had felt uncomfortable with these displays of respect at times, but it was just that discomfort. He didn't feel averse to it or reject it. Members of the same Familia were like family, connected by the blood of their god. They didn't share blood ties, but their blessings came from the same god who, like their own parent, inscribed the same sacred text on their backs. Therefore, considering they shared the same blood, it was entirely appropriate. In such circumstances, Familia members respected him but didn't fear him. If they were to sit together at a drinking table, 90% of them would dare to come over and toast him until he was flat out. That was what he had always dreamed of, a true family and home. I've become more sentimental lately. Riesel chuckled, shook his head, and continued walking ahead. However, as he walked, he quickly bumped into the familiar boy, who popped out from a bush nearby. Teach me magic! Isaac blurted out immediately upon appearing, just like before. However, unlike his previous arrogant demeanor, this time his eyes were shining as he looked at Riesel. Those eyes resembled those of a passionate young man who had found his goal. Yes, after witnessing Riesel's battle, Isaac also regarded Riesel as his role model and someone to take inspiration from. Yet, Riesel still had not changed his mind. No. He mercilessly rejected the boy. Why not? Isaac said extremely disgruntledly. What's your problem with me? It's not that I have a problem with you. Riesel squinted his eyes. It's just that I don't want my first disciple to be a dumb little twerp like you. Who are you calling a dumb little twerp? Isaac exclaimed breathlessly. I'm very smart, okay. And I'm not little. Sorry, didn't see that in you. Riesel said with no trace of politeness. You seem dumb to me, and you are indeed little, kiddo. Don't call me kiddo. You disrespectful jerk. Isaac yelled angrily. He was furious and quickly charged toward Riesel. Bang! Isaac was thrown back, landing on the ground. Watching him lying there without moving an inch, Riesel didn't know what to say. All right, stop messing around, Isaac. Medist chimed in as if timing her entrance perfectly. Don't mind him, he's just fooling around. She nodded to Riesel and then gave a slight bow. Her gaze, no longer evasive, now sparkled with an inexplicable radiance. However, this clearly made Riesel hesitant to meet her eyes directly. For some reason, he felt that after the war festival, something was off in the way this girl looked at him. Previously, Medist was a well-mannered, courteous girl, but these past couple of days, she seemed to have become a bit mischievous and would often do things that made him feel awkward. Just came out from your father's room. Riesel decided to change the subject. Yes. Medist nodded, sighing. He still refuses to come out of his room. Seems like he took a big blow this time. Alderman's condition was one of the changes after the war festival. After the war festival ended, he locked himself in his room, refusing to see anyone. It was understandable. Losing miserably to his own daughter with countless eyes watching, while the attendant he favored turned out to be a dangerous man almost destroying his carefully revived family tradition one blow after another. Considering his overly conservative views and pride, it's normal for him not to cope well. Medist explained her father's condition, surprisingly serious. Chapter 132, Special Guest? Undoubtedly, Alderman messed up big time at the war festival. War festival, meticulously planned to revive his family tradition and take a firm step toward reclaiming his family's former glory, ended up being a complete disaster. Initially filled with confidence, Alderman was toyed with, defeated, and even scolded in public by his daughter, feeling truly humiliated. Even his soon-to-be attendant, whom he had brought from outside, turned out to be a troublemaker, nearly causing a huge mess. This was truly a blunder among blunders. Moreover, to make matters worse, it was Riesel, someone from Yuri's side, who ended up dealing with Jill and became the hero of the day. What was Alderman's role in this incident? Nothing. He couldn't do anything, just stood in place dumbfounded the whole time. By the time he snapped out of it, it was all over and everything had concluded smoothly. While Riesel and Yuri had gained immense prestige, what about him? He became the laughingstock in many people's eyes, losing face to the point of no return. For Alderman, it was indeed a serious blow. Because of this, he retreated to his room upon returning home, feeling too ashamed to face anyone. His behavior only made Medist, who had once feared him, scorn him. What are you doing? Acting like a child? Is that what a mature man, an acting lord of territory, would do? Hiding away when you've done wrong. As Medist thought like that, she couldn't believe that the father who once seemed so decisive and formidable turned out to be nothing but a paper tiger. Was his ability to handle pressure even weaker than her own? It was truly embarrassing. Even Isaac, who had just gotten up from the ground, looked indignant and complained. After the war festival, elder sister Yuri handled the aftermath, even elder brother Cephas pitched in a bit. But father? Instead of helping, he's just hiding, totally ignoring the mess he made. What's up with him? Even a 9-year-old boy like Isaac couldn't stand to watch. Evidently, this time, Alderman had truly disgraced himself, losing all his dignity in front of his children. Mr. Riesel, how is your injury? Medist seemed unwilling to mention her embarrassing father any further, shifting her concern to Riesel. I'm fine now. Riesel raised his hand and waved it, indicating that he was fully healed. Yesterday, to protect Yuri, Riesel bravely blocked Jill's powerful slash with his bare hand, resulting in a deep gash on his left hand. Jill had clearly used all of his strength on that slash, even breaking through Ariel's wind barrier surrounding Riesel's body in an instant, leaving it unable to block the slash. Regardless, with Ariel's wind diminishing some of the slash's power, coupled with the added boost of end from Remure, the injuries Riesel sustained weren't severe at all. As for the few minor wounds he received from completely abandoning defense during the subsequent fight, they were even less of a concern. Yesterday, Riesel had used Diafratel on himself for treatment, effortlessly healing all his injuries. Now, he didn't have even a little bit of injury on him, as if nothing had happened. That's good. Medist relaxed her expression. It seemed that she was quite concerned about his injury. If there's nothing else, I need to go find Yuri. Riesel said to the two siblings. She just sent someone to fetch me. Upon hearing that, Medist understood instantly. Guests? Medist hinted. Probably. Riesel nodded. After the war festival ended yesterday, the Frenzel family, besides handling the aftermath, also received many visitors, which were nobles invited from afar by the aldermen to witness the war festival. Now that the war festival had ended, how could they not pay a visit to the Frenzel family and greet its head? Moreover, they were very interested in Riesel, who had demonstrated astonishing strength at the war festival yesterday, expressing their wish to meet him through Yuri. Riesel knew about this but chose not to meet them. He could easily guess the intentions of these so-called nobles. It was probably because they were impressed by his performance at the war festival and wanted to see if they could win him over, or at the very least establish some connection with him. Honestly, he had long grown tired of these upper-class society's antics. As a result, citing his injury as an excuse, Riesel refused all meeting requests from these nobles, leaving them all to Yuri to handle. Yuri also knew that Riesel didn't like these kinds of things, and she herself hoped that he could properly rest because of the injury she had caused him. Consequently, she readily intercepted all meeting requests from the nobles, preventing them from disturbing him. She even dispatched the nightly order to patrol Undine, looking for any suspicious individuals lingering in the city to prevent some malicious people from causing trouble in Undine for Riesel's sake. Thanks to Yuri's efforts, yesterday and this morning, Riesel had a peaceful time without any disturbances. But this time, it seemed he really had to meet a rather special guest whom he couldn't evade. I heard that someone quite influential from the royal capital has come, and they've specifically asked to meet me. Even though your sister said I'm resting, they've said they will stay at Undine until I'm available. Riesel shrugged. I don't want your sister to be too troubled, so I guess I'll just go and meet this guest. Since Yuri had specifically sent someone to fetch him, it proved that this guest's status was definitely not low or ordinary, or else she could simply decline them without much trouble. Because of this, Riesel decided to meet this guest. Then we won't bother you. Medist, understanding the situation well, obediently stepped aside to make way for him. On the contrary, Isaac, lacking in tactfulness, continued to hop over to Riesel. When will you teach me magic? Isaac grumbled, his face showing discontent. Are you afraid I'll take advantage of you? I won't, okay? Even though I don't know why the magic crystal with the latest recording was lost, I have others. We can discuss it in detail. Upon hearing Isaac's nonsense, the corner of Riesel's eye twitched. Without a second thought, he turned and walked away. Hey, wait! Isaac was about to call out to Riesel when a hand gripped the back of his neck. Did I hear you correctly? You actually have others. A voice as cold as ice echoed, causing Isaac to shiver and break out in a cold sweat. That's just a magic crystal recording of you sleeping. Absolutely nothing indecent. Isaac quickly tried to defend himself. Don't worry, elder sister Medist, I've learned my lesson this time. I'll only bring out proper recordings for the trade. I definitely won't bring out recordings of you changing clothes. At his words, veins bulged on Medist's forehead. You think I'm talking about what kind of recording you're bringing out? No, it's about why you're always recording those kinds of things. Medist thought with anger before holding her brother's hand with a strong grip. Come with me. Dragging Isaac along, she led him into a corner. 3 seconds later, Riesel, who had turned into another corridor, heard a scream that seemed to pierce the sky. What a troublemaker brat! Riesel muttered under his breath and quickly left the commotion scene. The Frenzel family's reception room was on the first floor. Guided by a servant, Riesel made his way to this room. Knock knock. Come in. Yuri's voice came from inside, prompting the knights guarding the doors on either side of the reception room to extend their hands and push the door open for Riesel. Riesel stepped inside, only to be greeted by 2 pairs of eyes locking onto him. In the reception room, there were a total of 4 people. Yuri sat on a sofa, with Marilyn standing behind her. Facing Yuri were 2 strangers whom Riesel had never seen before. They were a pair of men, one sitting across from Yuri, and the other, like Marilyn, standing behind the sitting one. Across from Yuri sat a golden-haired man, probably in his mid-20s, dressed quite appropriately, bearing a striking resemblance to the noble Riesel knew from his previous life. Finally, we meet, Sir Riesel Brynhart. Surprisingly, the golden-haired man quickly stood up when he saw Riesel, performing a noble gesture without a hint of arrogance, leaving an extremely positive first impression. Riesel. Yuri also stood up and smiled at Riesel. Let me introduce you. This is Marquis Philip Charlier from the royal capital. From her simple introduction, Riesel gleaned a lot of information. Firstly, this guest named Philip not only hailed from the royal capital but was also a noble of no lesser status than Yuri. Though Riesel wasn't sure about the status and reputation of the Charlier family in the royal capital, Yuri's use of Marquis to address him indicated that just like her family, the Charlier family was also a Marquis family of Gina's. Moreover, since he was addressed as Marquis, it could be inferred that like Yuri, he had already become the head of his family, which meant the current Marquis of Charlier. "Nice to meet you, Marquis Charlier." Riesel greeted back with a calm demeanor. "No need to be so formal, just treat me like any other guest." Philip responded with a friendly smile before introducing his attendant. "Right, he is my attendant, Glyman, about your age, 18 this year. Despite being young, he's already a skilled swordsman, holding a sword master medal for 3 years, you know? You two should get to know each other." His words made Riesel glance at Glyman. Glyman also glanced at Riesel, with a hint of fighting intent in his eyes. Seeing this, Riesel was slightly taken aback before raising an eyebrow. He felt it. This Glyman was a powerful swordsman. At least, not weaker than Marilyn. Chapter 133, Not Ordinary Relationship. Riesel was honestly amazed. He had to admit that there were so many powerful people in this world, such as now, where a swordsman equivalent to a level 5 first-class adventurer just casually popped out. If this were in the world of Danmachi, it would probably cause quite a stir. However, it made sense. A marquis who came from the royal capital with an attendant by his side would truly be unworthy of his status if his attendant wasn't at least a sword master. "Hello." Riesel nodded as a sign of courtesy. "Hello." Glyman returned the gesture, but the fighting intent in his eyes remained undiminished. Obviously, this man was very interested in Riesel, or rather, he really wanted to spar with Riesel. At the war festival, Riesel's displayed strength impressed this swordsman, sparking a desire in him to challenge Riesel. Unfortunately, the current timing wasn't right. Glyman resisted the urge to challenge Riesel, opting instead to stand behind Philip and focus on his duties as an attendant. "Please, have a seat and let's chat, Riesel," Yuri invited, patting the seat next to her. Riesel didn't hesitate much, naturally coming to her side and sitting down. However, this seemingly natural move didn't escape Philip's eyes, who suspected there was more to it. He glanced at the little distance between Riesel and Yuri, secretly surprised. "It seems that the relationship between Riesel Brynhard and Marquis Frenzel is even better than I imagined." Before this, Philip, like everyone else, thought that Riesel was a talent recruited by Yuri into the Frenzel family, serving as her capable subordinate. However, judging by their interaction and the distance they displayed right now, he could be absolutely sure that their relationship was not as simple as superior and subordinate. At least, Philip had never heard of Yuri letting anyone, let alone someone of the opposite sex, sit so close to her. Is it to warn me? Or? Philip's thoughts raced. He somewhat suspected that Yuri did this intentionally to hint to him not to speak out of line and warn him that Riesel had someone backing him up. But Riesel's action of sitting next to her was so natural that it was impossible to doubt if there was any deliberate intention behind it. Even if there was, it couldn't be denied that the relationship between both of them was not an ordinary superior-subordinate one. Realizing this, Philip toned down his casual demeanor a bit. At the same time, Riesel finally spoke up. "I wonder why Marquis Charlier wanted to meet me." Riesel didn't beat around the bush, diving straight into the topic. Yuri remained silent, quietly listening on the side. "Why, hey." Philip suppressed some miscellaneous thoughts and smiled. "The main reason I came all this way to find you this time is because of the royal family's orders." Upon hearing that, Riesel wasn't surprised. Ever since he learned that his identity as a tactical class magician had been exposed, he had anticipated something like this would happen sooner or later. "Is it because I used tactical class magic in the royal capital without permission that the royal family wants to punish me?" Riesel smiled faintly as he spoke. In principle, all major countries indeed prohibit magicians from using tactical class and strategic class magic in cities because of the potential harm it could cause. Especially strategic class magic, once unleashed, could potentially wipe out an entire city in an instant. Therefore, all countries on the continent explicitly forbid magicians from casting tactical class and strategic class magic without permission. Violators will be punished, with fines being the lighter penalty and even capital punishment being a possibility for more serious offences. Riesel had used tactical class magic without permission in the royal capital, so according to the law, he was liable to be pursued and punished by the kingdom. Of course, Riesel brought up this topic merely to shift the focus of the conversation, with a hint of perfunctoriness in his tone. In response, Philip shook his head with an involuntary laugh before beginning to explain. It's not about that. Sure, you used tactical class magic in the royal capital, but firstly, it was to repel an attack from a foreign tactical class magician targeting the Frenzel family, which is understandable. Secondly, it didn't cause meaningful damage, and only the Frenzel family itself suffered considerable losses, with their mansion being directly destroyed. That's why, the royal family has decided not to pursue your violation this time, so you can rest assured. That was probably one of the compensatory measures made by the royal family. They also knew that they had definitely angered Yuri this time and thus sought to make amends. However, Riesel didn't care about such matters at all. Whether the royal family pursued it or not was irrelevant to him. Even if they wanted to punish him, whether Yuri agreed or not was another matter. No matter what, the reason Riesel used tactical class magic in the royal capital was to repel a powerful foreign enemy, at least, this was the overall justification. If this were considered a crime, should he just stay silent and watch the Frenzel family being attacked, and Yuri being harmed or even killed? If this were the case, there would definitely be a lot of controversy. In such circumstances, Riesel wasn't worried at all about what might happen to him. Even if they did something, he didn't really care. At worst, he would just leave Gina's. However, it was obvious that Gina's wasn't going to let him go. The main reason I came this time was for your ennoblement. Philip revealed his true purpose. Since you have become a tactical class magician, according to the kingdom's regulations, you are eligible to visit His Majesty the King, receive a promotion, and be granted the title of Viscount. Sure enough, this man has come for that matter, hey. Riesel's expression remained calm, and his mind was equally undisturbed. Just for that? You came all the way here just to inform me about my ennoblement. A Marquis, the highest-ranking noble status just below the royal family, had actually come all the way to the Frenzel territory, situated on the northern border, solely for Riesel's ennoblement. Even though he happened to be a rare tactical class magician, it seemed like a bit too much trouble. If it were to recruit a tactical class magician as his own subordinate, that would be understandable. But to do the royal family's bidding, with no benefits whatsoever, a marquis need not go to such lengths. Facing Riesel's question, Philip hadn't even begun to explain when Yuri answered first. Marquis Charlier's visit isn't just for your ennoblement, it's also to confirm my situation. She spoke with the same calm expression as Riesel. It must be said, this scene made the two of them seem quite like a married couple. Philip felt somewhat awkward but still answered Riesel with a half-sighed, half-smile. Indeed, bringing the instructions from the kingdom regarding your ennoblement is the purpose of my trip, but confirming the status of Marquis Frenzel is also my purpose. Who let Yuri leave the royal capital with the excuse of escaping with severe injuries? Now that she had finally appeared in her own territory, naturally, the royal family would send someone to check on her, to see if she was really okay. Now that it seems Marquis Frenzel is well, I can rest assured. Philip didn't mention the oddities of this topic at all, nor did he inquire whether Yuri had really been seriously injured, as if deliberately avoiding this sensitive topic, he glossed over it. Did the royal family send you here to try and persuade me to return to the royal capital once it's confirmed I'm fine? As Yuri asked with a half-smile, Philip's expression became helpless. Ahaha. Marquis Frenzel is indeed perceptive. Philip said helplessly. But, judging by your current condition, it seems there are no plans for you to return to the royal capital, right? As you can see, I'm quite busy now. Yuri answered straightforwardly. A demon swordsman has just appeared in my territory. Considering the possibility that he may have accomplices who could threaten my territory, I must find a way to deal with this matter promptly. Moreover, with my family's war festival revived, I have numerous responsibilities to handle. Unfortunately, my father is currently unavailable to assist, leaving me swamped with work. I can only ask Marquis Charlier for understanding. Understood. Philip remained silent for a while, then gave up. I will report your situation to His Majesty, I believe His Majesty will understand. Thank you. Yuri nodded. What about Sir Brynhart? Philip turned to Riesel. Are you not intending to return to the royal capital with me? Facing Philip's direct question, Riesel answered even more directly than Yuri. Sorry, but I don't plan on heading back to the royal capital anytime soon. Riesel shook his head, his tone indifferent. Everyone is aware of the multiple attacks I faced there, nearly costing me my life once. It was a truly traumatic and terrifying experience, you know? So, for now, I'd rather stay in Frenzel territory and savor some peaceful days. His answer made Philip feel a bit awkward. No choice. The hidden meaning behind Riesel's words was clear. He indirectly expressed to Philip's face that the security in the royal capital is so terrible. Honestly, it left Philip, who represented the kingdom, somewhat speechless. Riesel had been attacked multiple times and narrowly escaped death was a fact well known among the nobles of the kingdom. Making matters worse, the Frenzel secondary residence in the royal capital also suffered an attack and was destroyed. Riesel's bringing up the royal capital's security issue made it really hard to argue against. The royal family is already investigating the mastermind behind the attacks. I believe before long, those daring criminals will face the kingdom's judgment. In the end, Philip could only say that to assure Riesel. Well then, let's consider returning to the royal capital after the kingdom's judgment is out then. Riesel nodded and finally let out a smile. Yuri also smiled, looking particularly happy. Seeing their smiles, Philip realized that Riesel seemed to have been waiting for that kind of response from him. Realizing this, Philip sighed inwardly. What else could he do? He could only accept this outcome and convey Riesel and Yuri's words about not returning to the royal capital yet. As for how the higher UPS would handle this matter, it was no longer his concern. He had done his best. Chapter 134, Becoming a Sword Saint? After discussing the main topics, Philip didn't leave immediately. Instead, he chose to chat with Yuri about some short stories involving their parents, seemingly aiming to ease the tension in the air. Now it was Riesel's turn to be left out, sitting aside and watching Yuri and Philip engage in conversation, talking on and on. However, the so-called short stories Philip and Yuri discussed were either about the actions of some noble family or the kingdom's internal affairs. In the eyes of outsiders, it seemed quite grand, giving off the impression that these two were indeed important figures. However, Riesel could tell that Yuri wasn't particularly interested in these kinds of topics. Maybe when she talked about such topics, it didn't feel like casual chatting but more like discussing national affairs, without any relaxation or joy. Could it be that this girl likes chatting with me because of this? Riesel suddenly realized this point. Whenever Yuri chatted with him, she always appeared cheerful and happy, which was completely different from her current calm and composed demeanor. It became clear to him that she probably enjoyed genuine casual conversations between friends rather than discussions that easily strayed into discussions about noble circles and national affairs like now. Watching Yuri sitting there, calmly conversing with Philip, Riesel silently thought to himself. I should chat with her more often when there's nothing else to do. That should make her happy, right? Thus, after about half an hour, Philip finally stood up. Now that everything we needed to discuss is done, I'll return to the royal capital. Philip said, bowing his head slightly. When you two return to the royal capital, I'll come to visit. Take care. Yuri nodded, not saying much more. Behind her, Marilyn stepped forward, ready to escort Philip out. Philip finally left the reception room with Glyman, leaving the Frenzel family behind. It was worth mentioning that before leaving, Glyman cast a glance at Riesel, showing a hint of reluctance. Unfortunately, Riesel had no mood to pay attention to this eager swordsman. Is this how it ends? Watching Philip and Glyman leave, Riesel couldn't help but ask Yuri. He was naturally referring to Philip easily giving up on persuading both of them to return to the royal capital. I thought he would linger a bit longer. Riesel muttered to himself. No point. Yuri shook her head, answering his question, as long as I have a valid excuse, he can't force me to return to the royal capital, and it's the same for you. On the surface, Riesel was still Yuri's person. In other words, even if Philip or the kingdom hoped Riesel would return to the royal capital, accept his noble title, and become a noble of Gina's, they still had to consider Yuri. With her there to support Riesel, they wouldn't dare to take any forceful actions against him. However, they certainly won't give up so easily either. Yuri turned to him, speaking quite earnestly. Your current strength has been largely exposed. Being a powerful sword master and a tactical class magician simultaneously, with such combat power, such talent, this kingdom is bound to not easily let you go. Mainly, they were worried that if they couldn't win Riesel over, he might run to another country and become their asset. A tactical class magician, while not on the level of a strategic class magician who could determine the outcome of a war, possessed powerful military capabilities that could sway the course of a war. Such people were scarce even in large countries like Gina's, numbering only 20 to 30. If they could have more, it would undoubtedly be beneficial. Not to mention, Riesel was also a powerful swordsman with formidable combat abilities. Your value now exceeds that of an average tactical class magician, just below sword saint and strategic class magician. Yuri pointed out the crucial points. To the kingdom and the royal family, someone like you is worth the cost to recruit. This visit from Marquis Charlier could be seen as a simple recruitment, but it could also be a test. They need to know your stance toward the kingdom to decide how to entangle you in this country. Upon hearing that, Riesel unconsciously frowned. From the looks of it, you really don't want to stay in Gina's. Yuri noticed his troubled expression and chuckled. Not exactly. Riesel shook his head. I don't mind staying in Gina's, but I don't want to become a noble, let alone be used as a tool by Gina's. His rejection wasn't toward the kingdom itself but rather the deceit and machinations he might encounter within it. Becoming a noble and entering the inner circle of the kingdom meant exposing himself to these things, again, like in his messy previous life. He wanted to avoid it at all costs. Yuri seemed to understand what was going on in Riesel's mind and fell silent for some reason. After a moment of pondering, she finally spoke up. If that's the case, then perhaps you need to think of a solution. With me around, the kingdom won't resort to using force against you, but there are still methods to trap someone in this country, as much as they want. Riesel didn't doubt her words. After all, Gina's was one of the 4 major countries on the Akasha continent. It was evident that the influence of a major country, once set in motion, could be quite problematic. At that time, Riesel might very well find himself already manipulated by unknown arrangements, grateful to be sold off and counting money for others with tears in his eyes. In such a scenario, he might even willingly head to the royal capital and accept the noble title and position he originally rejected. It wasn't an exaggeration at all. Nevertheless, Riesel didn't believe he could engage in a battle of wits and bravery with a powerful country like Gina's. Even Yuri, a strategic class magician, had many restrictions placed on her, so what could he possibly do? With this in mind, Riesel suddenly got an idea. How strong do you think I need to be for even a powerful country like Gina's to think twice before offending me? At his sudden question, Yuri was momentarily stunned. Looking at her reaction, Riesel lightly continued. Since they have ways to deal with me, I'll get stronger until they dare not make any rash moves, fearing the consequences if I uncover their schemes. That way, I won't have to worry so much about being manipulated, right? His words plunged Yuri into silence once again. After a while, she sighed. Then become a sword saint. Yuri revealed the solution. A sword saint? Riesel turned his head to her. Yes. Yuri nodded heavily. Becoming a sword saint means even the royal family will have to think twice before acting against you. Not as a strategic class magician, but as a sword saint. That's the only way to achieve what you want. Even a strategic class magician didn't have freedom, as evidenced by Yuri's own circumstances. So what if you are a nuclear weapon? Isn't control over nuclear weapons still in the hands of the country, something they can manipulate as they wish? The kingdom might see strategic class magicians as important military and war assets, but they had never feared such weapons. One of the reasons was the royal palace located in the royal capital, Yelovaya. The royal palace had a defense system set up to hinder the flow of magical energy. Be it tactical class magic, strategic class magic, or even combat level magic, none of it could be used within the royal palace. As the saying goes, strategic class magic only proves effective on the battlefield, while in some places, there might be means to counter it. However, sword saints were different. Sword masters alone could single-handedly defeat thousands of opponents as if strolling through an empty field. Considering this, one could only imagine the terrifying strength possessed by sword saints. With such a presence causing chaos in the royal palace, unless an equally skilled sword saint was dispatched to stop them, who could halt their rampage? Sword saints symbolized personal prowess and force, not directed toward countries or their armies, but toward the powerful figures in authority behind them. Because of this, the royal family wasn't too afraid of magicians. Although, the defense systems where they resided were not to be trifled with, the strict conditions for using high-class magic and the time it took for the magic to take shape provided the royal family with ample reaction time. However, the royal family certainly feared a powerful swordsman capable of slicing through their defenses in the blink of an eye and cutting their necks without them even realizing what had happened. This was why many in the magician circles looked down upon tactical class magicians and strategic class magicians, believing mastery of combat class magic to be essential. If a magician's combat strength rivaled that of a sword saint, even if they were not tactical class or strategic class magicians, the threat they posed in the eyes of powerful figures like the royal family would surpass that of tactical class and strategic class magicians. Strategic class magicians intimidated countries. Sword saints intimidated individuals. They were two different types of existence, each carrying its own significance. If Riesel desired status, fame, wealth, and significant privileges, then becoming a strategic class magician was the way to go. However, if his goal was to intimidate a specific individual or group by instilling dread, then becoming a sword saint would be the better option. Of course, if you can achieve both, the whole world will be at your disposal. You can go anywhere without worry. Yuri added, her eyes betraying a hint of anticipation. In fact, her words were not without reason. She just felt that perhaps this incredible feat was within Riesel's reach. A sword saint, hey! Riesel murmured, closing his eyes, and pondering what he should do next. If that's the case, then so be it. It's time for another dimensional travel. Chapter 135, Second Dimensional Travel. Frenzel family main residence, Riesel's room. After leaving the reception room, Riesel went straight back to his temporary room and locked the door behind him. Just moments ago, he had told Yuri that he wanted to rest in his room for the day, without needing food or being disturbed, and if she wanted to discuss anything with him, they could do it tomorrow. Yuri readily agreed, advising him to rest well and take care of his injury, assuring him that there was no rush to address anything until he was fully recovered. Evidently, she assumed his injury from yesterday hadn't fully healed yet, which was why she didn't question his request. However, since his injury had already completely healed, it was naturally impossible for him to go back to rest and recuperate. Having decided to embark on dimensional travel again toward the goal of becoming a sword saint, he didn't want any further delays. Besides, now that Yuri's marriage arrangement matter had been resolved and they had dealt with the situation in the royal capital, including the conclusion of the war festival, there shouldn't be any other important matters to worry about in the short term. Even if something important were happening, one day without me wouldn't be a problem, right? No matter how much time passed in other worlds, only one day would have passed in this main world after all. In just one day, he couldn't believe anything serious would happen. Nevertheless, considering safety, Riesel decided to take some precautionary measures. O word spirits, fulfill my wish. Veil of the woods, my name is Elf. Veil breath. Riesel cast a magic. In the next moment, a layer of greenish magic membrane appeared around his body, resembling a cloak, enveloping him. The magic he cast was one of the 3 defensive magic taught by Riveria to him, capable of resisting attacks. Among the 3 defensive magic taught by Riveria, this magic ranked second, with outstanding protective capabilities, far more reliable than the enhancement of Endbiremure. Since Riesel had poured most of his mind into this magic, as long as he wasn't repeatedly attacked, it should last for a long time and continue to be effective until he returned from dimensional travel. During the previous dimensional travel, he had no means to protect his body left behind in the main world while his consciousness journeyed to other worlds. At that time, he was desperate to gain power and couldn't think too much, hastily embarking on dimensional travel to the world of Danmachi. But this time, since he had enough power for self-protection, he couldn't leave his body in the main world defenseless during dimensional travel. If it weren't for him being at the Frenzel family's place, he even considered using his strongest defensive magic. Unfortunately, this strongest defensive magic was a barrier magic. If he used it, it would undoubtedly envelop the surrounding area and be noticed by others, causing significant disturbance. Reluctantly, Riesel had to abandon that idea and resort to using Veil Breath for protection. After completing these steps, Riesel also set up some simple magic at the door lock and other places, which would notify him if anyone opened the door or entered the room after he woke up. Yuri had taught him these simple magic. Surprisingly, this setup came in handy. Before doing dimensional travel, let's update my status. Riesel took out Loki's blood from the storage space and let a drop fall onto his forehead. Soon enough, a faint aura emanated from his back, forming floating sacred texts, one after another. Before long, his status was freshly updated. Riesel Brynhart. Level 5. STR, G284D570. End, G257D555. Dex, F312C611. AGI, F331C637. Mag, F305C632. Lightweight, GF. Swordsman, GF. Mage, HG. Battle Adept, I. The last time he updated his status was back in the royal capital. After leaving the royal capital, Riesel first rode in a horse carriage for a day to reach Trintia, then took a 3-day ship ride to the Frenzel territory, and spent another week preparing before the war festival began. When he added up these scattered moments, it had been about 2 weeks since his last status update. In less than 2 weeks, his total basic ability proficiency had increased by over 1,500. In a world without dungeons or monsters to defeat, this was quite impressive. Of course, the most pleasant surprise was that 3 development abilities had been upgraded by a rank. Well, I've been practicing my swordsmanship and magic lately, so both the swordsman and mage development abilities should show some growth. As for the increase in rank in lightweight, it seemed to have occurred because he hadn't been carrying heavy loads in training or combat. As for Battle Adept, it didn't change at all. Considering it was closely related to combat, and he had only been in a few battles since returning to this world, it was normal that it hadn't progressed. Overall, Riesel was quite satisfied with his growth this time. Now, he could face the upcoming dimensional travel in the best possible condition. After finishing his status update, Riesel sank his consciousness deep into his mind, focusing on the transparent cube slowly rotating within. But first, he checked his remaining dimensional energy. Dimensional energy, 40. When he returned to this world, Riesel had 23 units of dimensional energy left. Now, after about half a month, it had accumulated to 40 units. A random dimensional travel required 30 units of dimensional energy, so his remaining dimensional energy was more than enough. Dimensional Magic Cube, activate the dimensional channel. Riesel instructed the transparent cube in his mind. Before long, just like the first time he performed dimensional travel, the transparent cube in his mind began to rotate. Instructions accepted, starting the activation of the dimensional channel. Sufficient energy, beginning the construction of the dimensional channel. Built successfully. As the transparent cube rotated, each grid separated from the main body, disintegrating into countless transparent cubes. They spun and intersected with each other, ultimately forming a channel that extended to the depths of the consciousness sea, disappearing into the void. Finished with the opening of the dimensional channel, the information collection has been completed. Searching information highly compatible with the world on the other side of the channel from the user's memory, now arranging it. Successfully arranged. Connected world, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. Time scale, 1:180. Dimensional travel is the descent of consciousness, in which the user's consciousness is materialized in another world. Death of the consciousness after materialization will not affect the user, but the dimensional travel will end at the time of death. Please be careful. In the split second following the successful construction of the dimensional channel, the dimensional magic cube also relayed the message of this dimensional travel to Riesel's mind, which he received instantaneously. Riesel was immediately taken aback. Demon Slayer. Riesel's memories were triggered instantly, recalling the original work's worldview, settings, plot, and important characters one by one. At this moment, his exceptional memory proved invaluable, allowing him to smoothly recall most of the information about this world. It couldn't be said that there were no missing parts, but at least the important parts were remembered. This was a world set in the Taisho period. The Taisho period spanned from July 30, 1912, to December 25, 1926, a total of 15 years. For Riesel, who had lived until after 2020 in his previous life, it was an era over 100 years ago. In that era, there existed a group of swordsmen fighting in the shadows against monsters tracing back to 1,000 years ago, monsters known as demons. These were not like the monsters from the world of Danmachi, banished by humans into the dungeon, unable to return to the surface. Rather, they were humanoid creatures that fed on humans to survive. Demon fed on humans, gnawing on flesh, taking lives without mercy, utterly ruthless, causing numerous tragedies. Most people were unaware of their existence. Those who knew either perished by their hands or suffered greatly, having experienced firsthand the tragedies caused by demons. Because of this, these people spontaneously formed a group, united, wielding swords, determined to exterminate all demons in the world. This was the main story of the world of Demon Slayer, revolving around the struggle between demons and demon slayers, composing a tale that was both exciting and tragic. If it's this world. Riesel felt a mix of excitement and concern. Excitement, because this world had a power system that intrigued him. Concerned, because while this world had demons and other creatures to challenge, if he remembered correctly, demons weren't exactly abundant. He couldn't simply go about killing them as he did in Danmachi to rapidly grow stronger. Besides, the time ratio is different than before. 1:180. In other words, Riesel could spend a total of 6 months in the world of Demon Slayer, a full half year. Half a year seemed long, longer than the time he'd spent since transmigrated, but considering the situation in that world, whether he could accumulate enough exploits to level up within this half year was still uncertain. Fortunately, there were still some things worth exploring in that world. Thinking about the power system of that world, a few ideas flashed through Riesel's mind. Maybe it's worth a try. If his ideas could be realized, he might gain an entirely new power. Even if it fails, 6 months of effort will surely result in some growth, not a loss. With that mindset, Riesel reaffirmed his determination, lay down on the bed, and closed his eyes. After a while, his breathing steadied as if he had entered the realm of dreams. However, his consciousness was no longer in this world, it had traveled through the dimensional channel constructed in his mind to another world. The entire room immediately quieted down, leaving only the sound of Riesel's breathing, creating a peaceful atmosphere.
Thanks for listening.